Rita's body floats in red water. The camera doesn't move. The baby keeps crying. Cut. Dokes slams against the bars of a rusted cage, eyes locked on Dexter, the word killer hanging in the air, even if we don't hear it yet. Cut. Deborah stands in the doorway of a shipping container, gun shaking, as she stares at Lagerta on her knees and Dexter with a knife in his hand. Cut. Harrison, older now, arms rigid, a gun leveled straight at Dexter's chest in the new blood snow. Cut. We open on silence. No music, no explanation, just a stuttering montage of impact images, each one held a fraction too long, just long enough to sting before the next failure hits. A bathtub, a cage, a container, a gun. 4 frames in a single shattered life. 4 points on a trajectory that was never really under control. Over it, Dexter's voice cuts in, calm and almost smug. Control is the only thing that keeps me safe. As he says, control, we're on Rita's blood, seeping over porcelain. I follow a code, he insists, while Dokes grips the bars and the Bay Harbor butcher, investigation burns behind his eyes. I'm very careful, he promises, as Deborah steps into that container and realizes every plan, every lie is collapsing in front of her. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on the big deaths. Between these anchors, we flash micro moments, tiny operational failures that Dexter would rather we forget. A smear of blood he misses on a light switch. A neighbor's silhouette in a doorway as he drags plastic across a floor. Sirens closing in while a body is still cooling. Angela's printer in Iron Lake spitting out Dexter Morgan's old mugshot. The paper juddering like a heartbeat as the investigation finally catches up. Stalk the target, prepare the room, erase the evidence. That's the plan. But every quick insert we see contradicts it. A bloodslide case glinting in Dokes' hands. LaGuerta tracing ocean dump sites on a map. Security cameras, tire tracks, a kid's drawing of Jim with a dark red smudge. In this video, we're going to live in that gap between what Dexter thinks he's doing and what actually happens when his psychology meets reality. Each major section will unpack one of these frames. But right now, the montage keeps tightening. Faster cuts, louder silence, until everything stops. One held shot, Dexter on his knees in the snow, breath fogging, Harrison's gun trained on him. No score, no narration, just the final consequence of every earlier mistake, every broken code, every illusion of control finally stripped away. Fade to black. Then, softly, Dexter's voice. They say I was always in control. They never saw the moments right before the blood hit the floor. The central question hangs there. What if those moments were the real Dexter all along? That question is where the whole series flips. Because if we take it seriously, Dexter's story stops being about a mastermind in control and starts looking like something much darker. A man whose life is defined by plans that fail at the exact moment he believes they're working. On paper, Dexter is the fantasy of perfect control. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room, leave no evidence. He has Harry's code, a meticulous ritual, a job in forensics that lets him audit his own crimes in real time. He tells us he's a predator managing a monster through discipline and design. But when we actually track the major turns in his life, that self-image collapses fast. The biggest shifts don't come from the kills he plans. They come from the plans he thinks he's managing that spiral out of his hands. Brian isn't just a villain. He's the first proof that Harry's code has failed as a containment system. Dexter's plan is to keep his life neatly split. Brother by blood over here, sister by choice over there. The outcome? He's forced to kill his own brother and lie to Deborah forever. The intention and the consequence could not be further apart. In this video, we're going to lean into that gap. The focus is not just on who Dexter kills, but on what he thinks is going to happen versus what actually happens when his carefully plotted psychology hits the real world. If we rewatch the series, not as a story of a killer mastering his urges, but as a chain of plans collapsing under pressure, the entire trajectory reads as a tragedy of control slipping away. One adjustment, one improvisation, one cover-up at a time. And here's the wild part. We don't usually remember it that way. We remember Trinity in the bathtub, Dokes in the cage, La Guerta in the shipping container. We remember the headlines of the investigation, the big confrontations, the iconic kills. But we often miss the precise hinge points where Dexter's intention diverges from outcome, and the universe takes something from him in return. When Lila saves him by killing Dokes, is that a victory, or the moment the code loses its last shred of moral credibility? To keep this clear, each major section will lock onto one of those hinge points in each season. The moment where Dexter thinks he's orchestrating events, yet the real story is that he's reacting, improvising, and cleaning up after his own miscalculations. Early on, that's Brian and Dokes. Later, it's Trinity, Lumen, LaGuardia, Hannah, Deb, and finally, Harrison and Angela in Iron Lake. Along the way, we'll be asking, when does Dexter truly lose control for the first time? Is it when Dokes finds the blood slides? When Rita dies? When Deb walks into that church? By the end of this breakdown, we'll be able to point to an exact scene, and it's probably earlier than anyone wants to admit. So to move from that question into something we can actually dissect, we need a method. We're not here to relive every kill. We're here to run an investigation on every time Dexter's plan, his sense of control, and his carefully engineered system actually failed him. In this video, we're going to treat Dexter's life like a stack of case files, not murder files, collapse files. To keep this clear, each major section will zoom in on one dominant plan: the Bay Harbor Butcher containment strategy, the family man fantasy with Rita, the apprentice experiments with Miguel and Lumen, the clean break illusion with Hannah, the quiet new life script in Iron Lake. For each one, we'll ask, what was Dexter trying to build? What structure did he trust to keep it standing? And where did reality punch straight through it? Think of it like an autopsy of intention. First, motive and intention. Why this plan, in this season of his life, feels like the answer. Second, the system, the code, the rituals, the backup stories, the forensics job, the way he thinks he can outsmart any investigation. Third, the overlooked variable, Brian knowing his past, Dokes trusting his instincts, LaGuerta following patterns, Deb walking into that church, Angela using modern databases Dexter never anticipated. Finally, the break, the exact moment the fantasy of control can't keep up with the facts. Along the way, we'll track the recurring dynamics that keep looping underneath those specifics. Dexter's overconfidence in his own intelligence, the belief that if he's thought 3 steps ahead, he's untouchable. His hunger for connection, the way love for Rita, loyalty to Deb, fascination with Hannah, or the need to impress Miguel quietly bend the code until it isn't really a safeguard anymore, and his chronic underestimation of other people's insight especially the people who love him or hunt him: Lundy, Lagerta, Dokes, Angela, even Harrison. Here's the pattern interrupt. This is not just about the immediate body on the floor. The focus is not just on the bloody consequence right after a failure. We're going to follow the long tail of each collapse. When Dexter toys with Trinity, the fallout isn't just Rita's death, it's Harrison's trauma and Deb's spiral. When he kills Lagerta, the loss isn't just a rival, it's the moral center of Miami Metro, and the last thin line Deb was clinging to. So for every failure, we'll map the short term and the long term. Who dies that night? Who breaks over the next season? How each compromised decision tightens the noose around his double life until Iron Lake makes secrecy literally impossible. The central question under all of this is psychological. Why does Dexter keep making the same category of mistake in a new costume? What does it reveal about the limits of any life built on compartmentalization and denial? Once we start reading his story as a chain of case studies in miscalculation, the next step is obvious. We open the first file and watch the illusion crack. So, to keep this clear before we dive into specific seasons, we need a map. Dexter's life doesn't just fall apart randomly. His control dies in 3 predictable ways, over and over, each more dangerous than the last. Once we name them, the pattern stops feeling like bad luck and starts looking like design failure. First, operational failures. These are the moments where the machine breaks. The plan is clean on paper. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room, leave no evidence. In Dexter's ideal world, logistics are airtight and the investigation never gets close. But reality keeps puncturing that fantasy. Think about Lila blowing up Dokes in that cabin. Dexter's solution was to frame Dokes with the Bay Harbor butcher evidence and walk away. Instead, an unstable wildcard torches the crime scene, kills the one man who actually saw Dexter clearly, and leaves a blast radius of suspicion and chaos. The kill room, the body disposal, the cover story, every operational safeguard he trusted becomes fuel for a bigger fire. Second, relational failures. These are the times his need for connection overrides his logic. The focus is not just on who he kills, but who he tries to keep, protecting Rita and Harrison, clinging to the fantasy of a normal family. His obsession with Hannah, his inability to cut Miguel loose before it's too late. Each relationship starts as a control strategy and ends as a liability. Killing Lagerta is the purest example of this category, bleeding into something worse. Lagerta is not a target by the code. She's a colleague, a moral voice, and Deborah's boss. Dexter doesn't eliminate her because she's a monster. He kills her because she threatens the life he's built with Deb and the illusion that he can keep everyone safe. It's a relational and moral collapse disguised as a tactical move, and from that point on, every conversation with Deb is standing on a fault line. Third, existential failures. These are not about a single plan going wrong. They're about the entire structure cracking. When Rita dies in the bathtub because Dexter treated Trinity as a puzzle to play with instead of a threat to neutralize, it's not just a tragic twist. It's the universe returning the bill for every time he believed the code could neatly compartmentalize his darkness. Deborah walking in as he kills Travis Marshall, or Harrison turning the gun on Dexter in New Blood's final confrontation. Those are moments where the mask doesn't just slip, it shatters. The code, the father, persona, the heroic vigilante story he tells himself, all implode at once. In this video, we're going to tag each major failure with these 3 labels: operational, relational, existential. Early on, the damage looks manageable. A sloppy scene here, a close call there. Along the way, those slips snowball into broken bonds and eventually irreversible identity collapse. Each major section will follow that trajectory. So by the time we reach Iron Lake, we can see that Harrison pulling the trigger isn't an anomaly. It's the logical endpoint of every smaller crack that came before. Next, we'll kick things off where the illusion is still fresh. Season 1, the ice truck killer, and the first time Dexter's past refuses to stay buried. So, to keep this clear, we're going to walk straight through the wreckage, season by season, plan by plan, failure by failure. From here on, the structure is simple on the surface and brutal underneath. We'll move chronologically from season 1 all the way through New Blood, treating each season as a chapter in Dexter's losing battle with control. Each major section will track not just what case he's working, but how every attempt to manage his life, his urges, and his image quietly rewrites the trajectory of the entire story. In this video, we're going to anchor each season around 1 to 3 pivotal plans. Not just any mistake, not just a messy kill room, but the moments where a single choice doesn't stay contained. These are the operations that don't merely go wrong in the moment. They permanently bend the arc of Dexter's life, framing Dokes playing cat and mouse with Trinity, letting Deborah into the church at the exact wrong second. Each one is a point of no return, disguised as problem solving. Early on, the failures look like cracks, not collapse. Season 1 gives us Brian, the ice truck killer, weaponizing Dexter's childhood and forcing him to choose between his brother and his fake human life. Dexter still believes in Harry's code, still trusts his ritual, still thinks the investigation is under his control. But Brian proves that the code never accounted for family, memory, or love. Season 2 doubles down as Dokes stalks Dexter on pure instinct, turning blood slides, boat trips, and late nights at Miami Metro into a pattern any predator could smell. By the time Rita is in the picture, the suburban fantasy is already being built on lies that the code can't clean up. Then the middle seasons escalate everything. Miguel Prado doesn't just break the rules of the code. He exposes that Dexter's apprenticeship plan is really about ego and loneliness. The Barrel Girls case forces Dexter to improvise under federal scrutiny, while his partnership with Lumen blurs the line between justice and emotional compensation. Trinity is the ultimate stress test. Dexter's obsession with studying him, playing with his prey, and protecting his image as a family man leads directly to Rita's murder. From there, Deborah's unraveling turns every reactive, desperate decision into a moral landslide. How do you enforce a code once your sister has watched you kill? Finally, New Blood becomes the endgame, where all 3 categories of failure converge. Operational sloppiness in a small town, relational betrayal as Harrison sees through every lie, existential collapse as Angela's investigation links Iron Lake back to Miami. Under that pressure, every story Dexter told himself about control disintegrates. But before we reach Iron Lake, we have to watch the first brick loosen. Let's kick things off with Season 1, Brian's grand design, and the moment Dexter realizes the past isn't just a file in his head, it's a living threat that can plan back. Season 1 opens with Dexter convinced he's running the investigation, not being written into someone else's script. His plan is simple, almost elegant. Follow the code, keep the blood neatly inside plastic and procedure, maintain a compartmentalized life where Rita, Deborah, and Miami Metro never touch the dark passenger. The ice truck killer? In Dexter's head, that's just a professional curiosity, a puzzle he can solve on his own terms. But from the first dismembered body on ice, Brian refuses to play along. He doesn't hide in Dexter's blind spots. He walks straight into them. Painted fingernails, precisely drained corpses, bodies staged like tableaus only a forensics expert would fully appreciate. This isn't a killer avoiding detection. This is a killer asking a question. Who's really in control of this investigation? To keep this clear, Dexter believes he's the hunter. Stalk the pattern. Decode the psychology. Stay detached. Yet, Brian keeps violating the plan. He leaves the Barbie doll in Dexter's freezer, slices off the doll's limbs, escalates to that hotel room filled with bloodless bodies, each scene an invitation and a provocation. Along the way, the boundaries between case file and personal message start to blur. We're not watching a standard cat and mouse game. We're watching someone rearrange Dexter's entire sense of self. The first true loss of control hits when Dexter realizes the ice truck killer knows about the shipping container. The childhood trauma Harry tried to bury under the code is suddenly being reenacted in real time. A crime scene with blood that isn't really blood. Crime scene photos that mirror his fragmented memories. The central question flips. It's no longer, who is this killer, but how does he know me? Once Brian starts orchestrating scenes specifically to destabilize Dexter emotionally, the code stops being a safeguard and starts looking like a thin story taped over a gaping wound. And Dexter breaks his own rules in response. He withholds evidence from the investigation. He lies to Deborah about what he's seeing. He follows clues alone at night that any rational hunter would flag as traps. The fantasy of a brother who gets him, someone who doesn't need the mask, who shares the dark passenger without judgment, begins to override his usual caution. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this pattern. The moment emotional desire quietly rewrites the operational plan. It all converges in that meatpacking plant with Deborah on the table. Dexter thinks he can engineer a perfect compromise. Keep his sister, keep his brother, keep his life. But the scenario itself is the proof of failure. His compartments have collapsed into a single room, a single choice, a single knife. He doesn't execute a careful ritual. He makes a reactive kill, driven by panic and attachment. Brian dies not because the code demands it, but because Dexter's emotions have cornered him more effectively than any cop ever has. And once that line is crossed, the trajectory of the series is set. Every future plan will be haunted by the brother he chose to kill and the sister he chose to save. And the cruel irony is this: the sister he chooses to save is the variable he keeps miscalculating from the very beginning. Season 1 doesn't just introduce Deborah as comic relief in Vice. It quietly establishes Dexter's first major blind spot. He believes he can manage her. He believes that, compared to Brian or Dokes or any real predator, Deborah is easy. In this video, we're going to treat that belief as a plan in its own right. Dexter's unspoken strategy is simple. Keep Deborah close, keep her in the dark, and redirect her with half-truths whenever her investigation gets too close to his real life. To keep this clear, he doesn't see her as a threat, but as someone he can nudge away from danger with a reassuring smile and a slightly edited version of events. She's emotional, impulsive, eager for approval. In his psychology, that makes her predictable. But watch the ice truck killer case unfold. Again and again, Deborah's instincts drag her to the edges of Dexter's secrets. She pushes to move from vice to homicide at the exact moment the investigation heats up. She lands in Rudy's orbit because she's following a genuine investigative thread, not because Dexter steers her there. She notices patterns in the killer's staging, feels the emotional charge in the crime scenes, and keeps ending up in the right place at the wrong time. How many times does she almost collide with the truth without either of them realizing it? The focus is not just on the operational risk, though. The emotional cost of Dexter's deception starts here, in small, intimate conversations that feel harmless. Deborah opens up to him about feeling overlooked at the department, about wanting to prove herself, about craving something real. He responds with practiced warmth and selective honesty. He listens. He comforts. Then he withholds the one thing that matters most, who he actually is and what he actually knows about the man she's chasing. Every protective lie tightens the bond while hollowing it out from the inside. This is where the failure crystallizes. Deborah's near death at Brian's hands is not just a tragic twist. It's the direct consequence of Dexter misreading how involved she's become and how much information he's kept from her. He knows Rudy is circling his past. He knows the investigation is converging. Yet he still treats Deborah as someone he can shield with distance instead of truth. By the time Brian has her plastic wrapped on that table, Dexter's illusion of control over her life has completely collapsed. And yet, even after he chooses Deborah over Brian, he doesn't update the model. He doesn't ask the central question. What happens when someone this intuitive, this emotionally invested, finally turns that same investigative intensity on him? Along the way, every season will push Deborah closer to that answer until the sister he thought he could manage becomes the one force he can't redirect, can't mislead, and ultimately can't survive. So, when we hit season 2, that unanswered question about Deborah and Dokes doesn't stay theoretical. It gets dragged up from the bottom of the ocean with Dexter's entire past attached. Black bags, rotting bodies. The underwater graveyard he thought was invisible suddenly becomes the Bay Harbor butcher crime scene. And the investigation belongs to the same institution that trained him to believe he was untouchable. Let's kick things off with Dexter's mindset here, because the psychology is everything. His first reaction isn't terror, it's calculation. He walks that dock with his colleagues, looks at his own handiwork bobbing in the waves, and calmly decides he can stay ahead of the system that made him. In his head, this is just another plan. Identify the forensic vulnerabilities, redirect suspicion, maintain control. The failure isn't visible yet. It's baked into the confidence. To keep this clear, Dexter's master strategy in season 2 has 3 pillars. First, control the narrative of the investigation from the inside. He helps Masuka with body counts, nudges LaGuerta toward profile details that won't match him, and quietly manipulates lab work so timelines blur. Second, weaponize his understanding of trace evidence and dumping patterns to retroactively explain away anomalies. If the divers find something odd, he'll be there first to interpret it. Third, treat every coworker as a predictable variable, especially Dokes. Dokes is supposed to be a manageable obstacle, not a genuine threat to Dexter's autonomy. Dexter assumes the man running on instinct and rage can't outthink the forensics golden boy, so he builds a plan around that assumption. Bait Dokes into looking obsessed, plant the blood slides, frame him as the butcher if things get tight. What could go wrong when your scapegoat is already the department pariah? Here's the pattern interrupt. While Dexter is engineering the perfect fall guy, he decides this is also the moment to fix his addiction. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to that gap between operational control and emotional denial, and Season 2 is the first big case study. With Rita, Dexter attempts his first major experiment in quitting killing by sheer willpower. He blames his urges on heroin, fakes recovery, goes to meetings, and treats the dark passenger like a bad habit he can white-knuckle into submission. The focus is not just on the lies he tells Rita, but on the bandwidth he thinks he has. He believes he can juggle a federal task force dissecting his dump site, Dokes circling his every move, Lila probing his psychology at NA, and a full emotional performance as the wounded boyfriend trying to get clean, all while maintaining the code and covering up fresh mistakes. Each major section will show the same trajectory. Dexter overestimates his capacity to manage parallel crises and underestimates how fast they converge. Season 2 sets that template. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation and the I can stop anytime fantasy are not separate arcs. They're the same delusion, playing out on different fronts, already racing toward a collapse that will require someone else to take the fall. And the first person to pay for that overconfidence won't be Dexter. And the first person to pay for that overconfidence won't be Dexter. It's James Dokes, a human lie detector with a badge, a grudge, and no interest in Dexter's carefully curated mask. From the pilot on, he's background static, that one coworker who just never buys the act. But watch how that static escalates. A sideways glare at a crime scene becomes following Dexter. A hunch becomes catching him in contradictions. Suspicion turns into a private investigation that doesn't need a task force or a profile. It just needs Dokes refusing to let it go. To keep this clear, Dokes isn't working with evidence at first. He's working with psychology. He clocks Dexter's flat affect, the way he's always a little too prepared, the way his stories never quite line up. When he tails Dexter to the docks, when he finds him at the scene of a dismembered body with no good reason to be there. Each encounter chips away at Dexter's illusion of control. The central question becomes, what happens when the one variable Dexter can't script is a colleague who's actually paying attention? The answer is the Everglades cabin, the first truly improvised off-code plan of Dexter's life. Dokes catches him mid-ritual, sees the plastic, the knives, the slides. There's no way to talk his way out, no tranquilizer neat enough to reset the board. So Dexter kidnaps him, chains him in a remote cabin with no warrant, no trial, and crucially, no code clause that covers innocent cop who knows everything. In that moment, Dexter's neat moral architecture collapses into pure damage control. This is the first time we watch him trapped in sustained day-by-day failure. He's not stalking a target. He's feeding one, making excuses at work, driving back and forth to the swamp, juggling the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, Rita, rehab, and a prisoner who won't play his assigned role. Dokes doesn't beg. He doesn't break. He demands Dexter turn himself in. Every day that Dexter delays, he generates new lies, new logistical problems, new consequences he can't predict. Along the way, we see every safeguard Dexter trusts start to misfire. His lab work? It creates the very pattern Lundy's team is chasing. His alibis? They fray as he disappears for hours to deal with Dokes. His emotional mask? It's meaningless to someone who decided, seasons ago, that Dexter was a predator hiding in plain sight. The focus is not just on one cop getting too close. It's on the realization that Dexter's system was never designed to handle a relentless, intelligent insider. By the time Lila finds the cabin, Dexter has already lost control. He's out of plans, out of clean exits, choosing between mutually assured disasters. Kill an innocent man, confess, or let someone else intervene. Lila solves the problem by blowing up the cabin and framing Dokes. But that's not a victory. It's a cover story built on a corpse Dexter swore he'd never create. Season 2 doesn't show Dexter beating the investigation. It shows him surviving the collapse of his own rules at the cost of letting someone far worse rewrite the narrative for him. Lila doesn't just rewrite the narrative. She hijacks the entire operating system Dexter thought only he could access. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation doesn't end with a mastermind closing his final loop. It ends with an arsonist tourist lighting a match in the middle of Dexter's broken plan and walking away, smiling. Let's kick things off by remembering how Dexter first reads Lila. She's supposed to be compartmentalized, the edgy sponsor, the thrilling chaos he can sample without ever letting her near the code, the table, or the real psychology of what he is. In his mind, she's a controlled burn, a way to vent pressure while he methodically frames Dokes and steers the investigation toward a neat resolution. But the central question hanging over every scene with Lila is simple. What happens when the person you treat as a side quest decides they're the main character? The answer hits the moment she finds Dokes. No stalking ritual, no plastic, no confirmation of victims. Just Lila, staring at a caged man and deciding on her own that he has to die to keep her, Dexter, safe. When she blows up the cabin, she doesn't just kill Dokes. She obliterates Dexter's illusion that he alone decides who lives and dies inside his orbit. The explosion is loud, messy, and completely off-plan. There's no syringe, no slide, no carefully designed dump site. Evidence is destroyed in a way he didn't script. And the death at the center of Season 2, the death that saves him, belongs to someone else's impulse. To keep this clear, this is an operational failure, a moral failure, and a psychological failure, all at once. Operationally, Dexter is now retrofitting his story to match a crime scene he didn't build. Morally, he has to accept that his survival is welded to the murder of an innocent man he refused to kill himself. Psychologically, the control fantasy cracks. If Lila can intervene once, who else might step into the gap the next time his plan stalls? And the relational fallout just keeps spreading. Rita sees the erratic behavior, the lies, the emotional whiplash Lila brings out of him, and her trust fractures. His sponsor becomes a stalker, weaponizing intimacy, showing up at his work, his home, even threatening the kids. By letting someone into his emotional sphere, Dexter hands them leverage over every system he thought insulated. The investigation, the family facade, the code. How do you maintain a double life when the person who knows your feelings doesn't know your rules and doesn't care? Along the way, Lila becomes our first clear template for what happens whenever Dexter's plans start to fail. A vacuum opens. Opportunists and wild cards rush in. Damage escalates beyond anything he anticipated. Leela doesn't just save Dexter from Dokes, she teaches him the worst possible lesson, that if he survives the collapse, the plan worked. And the trajectory from here is set, because once one outsider rewrites his script with fire, we have to ask, what happens when the next one carries a badge, a law degree, or his last name? So, when the next outsider walks in with a badge, a public profile, and a righteous cause, Dexter doesn't see a threat. He sees an upgrade. Season 3 opens with a fantasy of control. If Lila was chaos, Miguel Prado can be order. A powerful prosecutor, a family man, a symbol of the law. What better shield for a serial killer than a best friend who literally prosecutes his competition? Let's kick things off with Dexter's plan on paper. He'll carefully introduce Miguel to the code. Not the whole truth at once, but in stages, like Harry did with him. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room, leave no evidence. Dexter believes that by controlling the rules, he can safely share his secret, reduce his isolation, and still keep the system airtight. In his mind, this isn't recklessness, it's controlled expansion. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on the friendship. It's on Dexter deciding he can be Harry now. He assumes the code is transferable, that the same behavioral training that shaped him can simply be copy-pasted into another damaged psyche. The central question for him isn't, should I tell someone? It's, how do I manage them once I do? He thinks he's learned from Harry's failures, that he won't have the same blind spots, that he can watch for warning signs and intervene before anything goes off script. And Miguel's status makes the whole thing feel strategically brilliant. A prosecutor who admires him, a man with access to investigations, warrants, and political cover. Dexter frames it as risk management. If the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation ever resurfaces, what better ally than the person who can redirect cases, bury leads, and vouch for his character? In this video, we're going to keep seeing this pattern. Dexter mistakes proximity to power for safety, as if the system that should expose him can be turned into armor. But the early cracks are immediate. Miguel is impulsive. He rages in court. He fixates on personal slights. He bends legal rules whenever emotions spike. We watch him obsess over Ellen Wolf, not as a threat to society, but as a personal enemy. He doesn't want justice. He wants payback. Those are not subtle red flags. They're sirens. Yet Dexter reads that volatility as passion, as proof that Miguel understands the darkness. Here's the pattern interrupt. Miguel doesn't want a code. He wants permission. When Dexter gives him his first glimpse behind the curtain, Miguel doesn't become a disciplined apprentice. He becomes emboldened. The psychology flips. Dexter thinks he's installing safeguards in another killer. In reality, he's uninstalling the last restraints Miguel had. This is Dexter's first real attempt to scale his system. Not just protect it, not just hide it, but replicate it in someone else. And that ambition exposes the deeper failure. Because if Dexter can't fully control his own urges, his own exceptions, his own rationalizations, what happens when those same tools land in the hands of a man with public power and no internal brakes? Season 3 will answer that, and the consequences will ripple far beyond one friendship. Each major section will track how this experiment in mentorship mutates from protection into exposure, from alliance into blackmail, until the illusion of control collapses yet again. Miguel off the leash is where Dexter's fantasy of mentorship collides head-on with the reality of another man's ego. Dexter thinks he's building a controlled experiment. What he actually builds is a rival predator who decides the lab rules don't apply to him. We see the break in one brutal, specific image. Ellen Wolf's body dumped publicly, not wrapped in plastic, not on a table, not vetted through victim files or careful investigation. Miguel doesn't stalk, confirm, and prepare. He vents. He weaponizes Dexter's tools for a personal grudge, proving the code in his hands is just decorative language around raw rage. That's the moment the boundary Harry designed stops being a fence and becomes a suggestion. To keep this clear, up to that point, Dexter believes he's in control of the trajectory. He shows Miguel the ritual, walks him through the selection criteria, pretends that if Miguel just memorizes the rules, the psychology will follow. But when Miguel kills Ellen, he's not misapplying the code. He's rejecting its core premise that the urge has to be restrained by something higher than the self. Miguel's higher is his own importance. The central question for Dexter shifts overnight. It's no longer, can I teach someone the code? It becomes, what have I unleashed on Miami? As Miguel starts improvising his own justifications, Dexter realizes he's created a variable he can't model. Miguel has public power, social capital, and a temper. He's not a hidden monster in the shadows. He's a celebrity monster who loves the spotlight. That makes him more dangerous than most of Dexter's previous targets, because exposure is now walking around in designer suits and giving press conferences. This is where the plan snaps from partnership into containment. Instead of collaborating on kills, Dexter is suddenly in reactive mode, scrambling to plant bugs, steal clothes, gather fibers and skin cells, anything he can use as leverage. He's building a case file on a man who knows his face, his method, his code, and can blow up his life with a single angry confession. How do you box in someone who can burn you down while you're still reaching for the duct tape? Along the way, the relational failure comes into focus. Dexter projected his own compartmentalization onto Miguel, assuming another killer could keep work, family, and murder in neat, separate boxes. Miguel can't. He wants power, validation, worship. He flaunts his secret instead of hiding it, turns the dark passenger into a campaign slogan only he can hear. When Dexter finally kills Miguel, it feels like resolution. The immediate threat is neutralized, the leverage buried, but it's a hollow victory, because the focus is not just on one rival removed. It's on what the experiment revealed. The code is not a universal system of control. It only ever worked on Dexter, barely, and even then, at enormous cost. After Miguel, every future alliance will carry that scar. And the next time Dexter reaches for connection, that doubt will already be waiting. That doubt is exactly where Season 4 pounces, because Dexter doesn't pull back from the experiment. He doubles down. If Miguel was a failed prototype, Arthur Mitchell becomes the full-scale model. On paper, Trinity is everything Dexter wants to believe he can be. A decades-long kill streak. No arrest, no serious investigation, no public suspicion. A soft-spoken church deacon, devoted husband, father, grandfather. From a distance, it looks like the fantasy completed. a functioning family man wrapped neatly around a meticulous predator. And Dexter's reaction is immediate. He has to know how this works. In this video, we're going to track how that curiosity curdles into the worst miscalculation of the series. Dexter doesn't approach Trinity as a threat. He approaches him as a resource. The plan is deceptively simple. Shadow Arthur, study his rituals, his cover story, his psychology. Extract whatever secret has allowed this man to keep killing while maintaining a home, a marriage, and a public role. Then bring those lessons back to Rita, Aster, Cody, and baby Harrison, as if he's just upgrading software on an already stable system. To keep this clear, Dexter thinks he's running a controlled experiment. Maintain the code. Keep his own kill rooms. Precise. But add Trinity's tricks for juggling PTA meetings, neighborhood barbecues, and serial murder. He believes he can refine his trajectory. Less chaos, fewer close calls, more balance. The central question, in his mind, is purely operational. What is Arthur doing that he isn't? But that framing is the first failure, because Arthur isn't a dark mentor. He's a slow-motion collapse held together by terror. As Dexter embeds himself in the Mitchell household, the glossy surface cracks fast. The daughter's fear, the son's rage, the wife's bruised compliance, the way every family interaction is saturated with Arthur's volatility. This isn't a man who mastered integration. It's a man who outsourced his violence into his own living room. Dexter misreads all of this as manageable noise. He assumes Arthur's abuse is a variable he can observe without absorbing. He keeps telling himself he's different, that his own family will never look like this, that he can steal the technique without inheriting the damage. That's the arrogance. After surviving Dokes, Lila, and Miguel, he believes he can stand next to a ticking bomb, dissect it, and walk away untouched. Each major section will show a version of this hubris. But here, it's especially stark. Dexter thinks he can play both sides indefinitely. Loving husband and efficient predator. Doting father and invisible executioner. He trusts that the walls between those roles are solid, that the code plus his forensic expertise equal permanent control. In reality, every day he stays close to Trinity. He's dragging that instability closer to his own front door. He's giving a family annihilator time, access, and proximity. The focus is not just on what Arthur might do if Dexter slips. It's on what happens the moment their patterns intersect in the wrong place. And when that intersection finally comes, it won't be in a kill room Dexter prepared. It will be in a space he thought was untouchable. We're not there yet. But the next move he makes with Trinity all but guarantees it. The next move is the one that damns him. Dexter decides Trinity is more valuable alive than dead. Instead of ending Arthur Mitchell the first clean chance he gets, he turns a serial killer into a long-term project. He wants to study him, learn from him, maybe even upgrade the code. This is not a hunt anymore. It's a seminar. To keep this clear, Dexter has multiple operational windows where a standard Bay Harbor butcher plan would have worked. He has Arthur on the table in the abandoned building. He has him isolated in the restroom, at the charity event. He even has his pattern mapped out with a level of detail Miami Metro's investigation never achieves. But every time he pulls back. Why? Because the central question for Dexter in Season 4 quietly shifts from, how do I stop Trinity, to what does Trinity mean for me? That shift is lethal. Dexter prioritizes psychology over safety, curiosity over containment. he breaks his own rule about minimizing exposure by embedding himself in Arthur's life, infiltrating the Four Walls Project, inserting himself into family dinners. He thinks he's in control of the experiment. He thinks he can pause the killings while he takes notes. He can't, and every delay creates a new crack. Operationally, the failures pile up. He underestimates Arthur's paranoia and his capacity for counter-surveillance. He lets Trinity walk out of the police station after the Kyle Butler sketch surfaces. He loses him at the mall. He fails to clock that Arthur has connected Kyle to the department and then to Dexter himself. Each missed kill room, each surveillance slip, is Dexter betting that there will always be another chance to fix it later. There isn't. When Arthur finally says, "Hello, Dexter Morgan," the entire architecture of compartmentalization collapses in one line. Dexter's real name, his real job, his real address, all become attack vectors. The family he built as proof that the code could coexist with normal life, it turns into a map for his enemy. The focus is not just on Trinity as a rival killer, it's on Dexter's own life as an exposed pressure point. If Arthur knows the husband, how long until he finds the wife? We don't have to imagine the answer. We see it. Rita's body in the bathtub is more than a plot twist. It's a visual echo of Dexter's origin. Blood-filled water, a helpless child, a family annihilated while he survives. Harrison, crying on the bathroom floor, recreates Dexter's trauma shot for shot. But this time, Dexter isn't the passive victim of someone else's massacre. He is the architect of the circumstances that put Rita in Arthur's path. In that moment, Dexter confronts an existential failure. His system doesn't just fail to protect the people he loves, it actively endangers them. The universe cashes in every arrogant decision he made to treat Trinity as a game. And the payment is something irreplaceable. From here, Dexter's trajectory changes. The illusion that killing is a controlled necessity dies with Rita in that tub. What's left is a man who has to face the consequences of turning murder into a research project, and the universe isn't finished taking things from him yet. Season 5 opens on that absence. Rita's gone, the bathtub is empty, and Dexter is standing in the wreckage of a plan he thought was airtight, and into that vacuum, the universe drops Lumen. She doesn't arrive as a partner. She arrives as a problem. A screaming woman wrapped in plastic in Boyd Fowler's kill room. A witness to Dexter's process. A loose end the code says he should cut. Stalk the target. Confirm the victims. Prepare the kill room. Leave no evidence. Lumen is the opposite of all of that. To keep this clear, Dexter's first instinct is the old operating system. Eliminate the risk. But when he watches her flinch at every sound, when he sees the terror in her eyes, mirror the terror he imagines Rita felt, something shifts. The central question in his psychology stops being, how do I avoid exposure? And becomes, how do I make this mean something? That's the crack where guilt gets in. Suddenly, Lumen isn't a witness. She's a vessel. A survivor of the Barrel Girls, a living indictment of men who look a lot like his usual targets, but are tied directly to his greatest failure. Helping her doesn't feel like breaking the code. It feels like expanding it. If he can help her hunt down every man who hurt her, maybe Trinity didn't die as a loose thread. Maybe Rita didn't die for nothing. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this move. Dexter reframing disaster as destiny. Here, the plan becomes a controlled project. Channel the dark passenger into something that looks morally justified. Use his skills, his kill rooms, his meticulous investigation habits, but aim them at a list Lumen provides. On paper, that sounds like control upgraded. In practice, it's control hollowed out by emotion. Because this is not Harry's code talking. This is guilt, protectiveness, and the desperate need to see himself as more than a monster. That emotional charge makes the plan feel righteous, but it also makes it unstable. Lumen isn't a trainee. She's traumatized. She's impulsive. She bolts from scenes. She fixates on faces. She wants revenge now. Every time she steps into a kill room, Dexter is multiplying the risk. More DNA, more witnesses, more ways the whole thing can collapse. Pattern interrupt. Imagine Dokes watching this season. Would he see a noble crusade or a killer recruiting a victim to launder his conscience? The focus is not just on the logistics of their kills, but on how Dexter keeps overriding his own safeguards because the emotional payoff feels worth it. He lets Lumen into his rituals, his secrets, even his home. Season 5 becomes his first major attempt to rewrite his narrative. From predator hiding in plain sight to avenging angel with a partner who sees him. And that rewrite blinds him. He's so invested in this fantasy of redemption that he misses the new categories of failure he's inviting in. Shared culpability, shared exposure, and a shared ending that can't last. Because if his life with Rita proved one thing, it's this. Every time Dexter builds a story about who he thinks he is, reality eventually shows up to collect. And this time, reality is walking around Miami with trauma, a hit list, and his face memorized. Reality shows up as the Barrel Girls case, and suddenly, Dexter's fantasy of controlled collaboration has to operate inside an active public investigation. Barrels of dismembered women pulled from a swamp, multiple perpetrators still at large, news cameras everywhere, and Miami Metro building a victim-centered narrative that turns every lead into a headline. The plan isn't just to kill bad men anymore. It's to do it while the entire city is watching. To keep this clear, the operational complexity here is unlike anything Dexter has faced. We have Jordan Chase as the charismatic center of the ring, a rotating cast of rapists and accomplices, and a timeline that's still unfolding while Deborah and the task force dig in. Every new body or missing suspect doesn't just raise suspicion, it tightens the net. Each major section will show us the same pattern. The more public the case becomes, the less room Dexter has to improvise. And then there's Lumen. Her trauma-driven urgency slices straight through Dexter's usual precision. She pushes for faster moves, riskier meetings, rushed kill rooms. Think about the hotel attack that almost blows up in their faces, or the botched ambushes where suspects slip away because she lunges before Dexter is ready. His ritual of stalk, confirm, prepare collapses into chase, react, clean up. He's not orchestrating, he's scrambling. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this question. What happens when righteous anger becomes the engine of the plan? With Lumen, Dexter trades methodical surveillance for emotional triage. That's why we get near discoveries in broad daylight, blood on boats that should stay spotless, and scenes where they're dragging bodies while other suspects or bystanders are one wrong turn away. The focus is not just on the kills themselves, but on how often they almost lose the entire trajectory of the investigation. Relationally, control slips even faster. As Lumen heals enough to stand on her own, her vengeance stops being an extension of Dexter's code and starts becoming its own system. She sets up meetings without telling him. She confronts targets alone. She decides who deserves to die based on her memory, not his evidence. For the first time since Miguel, Dexter is partnered with someone whose next move he can't fully predict. But this time, the volatility is wrapped in victimhood, which makes it harder for him to say no. All of that funnels into the final warehouse confrontation. Deborah's investigation, Lumen's vendetta, Jordan's last stand, and Dexter's secret life all converge in one concrete box. Deb is literally on the other side of the plastic sheeting, gun drawn, seconds away from seeing her brother mid-kill. Dexter survives that moment, not through flawless planning, but through a blind spot. Deb choosing to free the unknown vigilantes and walk away. It's mercy, luck, and trauma. Recognition, not design. And then, just when Dexter thinks he's stabilized something, Lumen leaves. Her darkness is gone. The mission is over. He can't make her stay, can't freeze that brief illusion of shared purpose in place, and can't stop his old patterns from rushing back the second she walks out. This is a different kind of collapse, not exposure, but abandonment. If even someone who has seen his true face can move on, what does that say about the story he's been telling himself about control, connection, and what his life is for? The answer to that question is waiting in the next failure he engineers. And that brings us to the strangest reset of all. Dexter alone again, a single father in a quieter apartment, packing school lunches by day and plastic wrap by night, telling himself, this is balance. Season 6 opens like a performance review of his own life. PTA events, Harrison's birthday party, a reunion with old classmates. On the surface, the plan is simple. Re-establish routine. Keep the dark passenger on a tight leash. Pretend the past collapses were just anomalies. Then the horsemen ride through Miami. Bodies arranged as biblical tableau. Bowls of blood. Cryptic verses carved into skin. The Doomsday Killer investigation crashes into Dexter's carefully managed schedule like a revelation he didn't ask for. In this video, we're going to treat Season 6 as more than a weird religious detour. It's the moment Dexter's own belief system gets dragged into the light and compared, point by point, with someone else's holy war. Because when Dexter looks at Travis Marshall and Professor Geller, he doesn't just see a serial killer duo. He sees a funhouse mirror of himself and Harry, an all-powerful mentor, a devoted student, a code dressed up as scripture. The central question becomes unavoidable. If Travis can frame ritual murder as divine purpose, what exactly has Dexter been doing all these years? Is Harry's code really different, or just a more socially acceptable delusion? To keep this clear, think about how quickly fascination replaces caution. Dexter should be tracking evidence, anticipating escalation, tightening his operational net. Instead, he's lingering at crime scenes, decoding symbolism, almost admiring the commitment. He stalks Travis not just as prey, but as a case study in psychology and faith. How does a person come to believe that killing is righteous? How far is that really from believing the code makes you necessary? So, he builds a new plan around the Doomsday case. Use Travis as a live experiment. Test whether evil can be channeled into a higher purpose, whether a killer can be redirected rather than destroyed, whether Dexter himself might be something more than a predator with rules. The focus is not just on stopping the murders, but on proving a thesis about his own soul. Along the way, the practical risks blur out of frame. That's the quiet failure of this season. While he's busy weighing good and evil in abstract terms, the kills escalate in spectacle and danger. Public displays, massive props, a pattern any competent task force could ride straight to exposure. Dexter's clarity, which used to be tactical, turns philosophical. Faith, delusion, and ideology start to occupy the mental space where logistics and caution used to live. Each major section will show how that shift matters, but Season 6 is the hinge. We move from botched operations and broken cover stories into deeper existential cracks. If Travis can blame God and Dexter can blame the code, who is actually in control? The answer won't stay theoretical for long, because the next collapse ties these questions directly to the one person Dexter swore he'd never endanger again. If Season 6 is the hinge, the rooftop church is the moment the door slams on Dexter's fantasy of control. We go from debating theology and the code in the abstract to a single, brutal image. Dexter in plastic and blood, framed in a doorway as Deborah walks in. To keep this clear, let's kick things off with Dexter's plan. Lure Travis back to the church. Neutralize him with a syringe. Execute a clean kill according to the code. Photos on the walls, plastic everywhere, a confession carved into the tableau. Then dump the body, wipe the church, and let Miami Metro close the doomsday investigation on some half-plausible narrative that never points back to him. Operationally, it's classic Dexter. Familiar location, controlled environment, no witnesses. But embedded in that plan is a fatal blind spot. Dexter calibrates for cops, for cameras, for crime scene techs who think like he does. He does not calibrate for Deborah. He underestimates her determination, her timing, and her emotional trajectory. She's just decided, in the most confused, vulnerable moment of her life, that she might be in love with him. Of course, she goes to find him. Of course, she pushes harder than he expects. The central question here isn't, how did Deborah catch him? It's, why did Dexter ever think she wouldn't? On the rooftop, that miscalculation becomes physical. Travis wakes on the kill table. Dexter delivers the monologue. The knife comes down, and for once, the universe doesn't wait until later to punish his overconfidence. Deborah walks in on the full ritual. The plastic, the tools, the body, and Dexter's face. In that detached, predatory calm, he never shows her. She doesn't just see a corpse. She sees the system. She sees the code made flesh. This is where operational, relational, and existential failure fuse into one frame. Operationally, the no-witness rule is obliterated. Relationally, the one relationship he's been trying to protect since Brian, since Lila, since Rita, is detonated in a single second. Existentially, the mask and the monster occupy the same space. There is no work Dexter and brother Dexter anymore. There is just the man with the knife. Watch Deborah's psychology rupture. In real time, her body freezes. Her voice fractures. All the half-noticed red flags from earlier seasons, his late nights, his distance, the convenient confessions, collapse into a single, horrifying through line. In that instant, Dexter loses narrative control. He can't joke. He can't deflect. He can't hide behind the investigation or the language of justice. Anything he says now is a reaction to what she has already seen. From this point on, Dexter's life is no longer a double life. It's a contested story, how he sees himself as a necessary predator guided by a damaged code, runs directly against how Deborah now knows him, as a serial killer who chose ritual over honesty, secrecy over her safety. Which version wins? Which version can she live with? And when the next crisis hits, whose definition of Dexter Morgan will actually decide who dies? Deb's definition of Dexter is barely formed when another colder definition starts hunting him, Maria Laguerta's. Season 7 opens not with a new killer stalking Miami, but with an old investigation clawing its way out of the grave. A single blood slide at the Dokes crime scene. That tiny rectangle of glass is the moment the Bay Harbor butcher case exhales and sits up. To keep this clear, that slide should not exist. Dokes was dead. The case was closed. Leela's explosion wrapped everything in a neat, tragic bow. But Laguerta, walking that charred site, finds a blood slide identical to the ones Dexter thought he'd destroyed. Concrete image, a glint of plastic among rubble. Abstract consequence, the entire official story of Dokes as the butcher is now suspect. If there's a slide here, then maybe the real butcher is still alive. Maybe the real butcher is still at Miami Metro. This is the first time the investigation doesn't just circle Dexter's odd hours or his proximity to bodies. It circles the code, the ritual itself. The focus is not just on what Dexter does, but on how he does it. The trophies, the patterns, the psychology, written into every carefully labeled drop of blood. Laguerta doesn't know his name yet, but she is, for the first time, reverse engineering Harry's design. Dexter's response is revealing. His plan is not to outthink Laguerta's logic, but to outplay her reputation. He leans on years of appearing harmless and cooperative, the quiet lab guy who brings donuts and helps everyone close their cases. He assumes that if he stays calm, helpful, and available, her questions will look like obsession rather than insight. She'll be the one on trial, not his history. And he has reason, on paper, to be confident. Laguerta's relationships inside the department are strained. She's climbed ranks through politics, made enemies, and already misjudged major cases. Dexter counts on that institutional memory to do his work for him. The central question in his mind isn't, can she prove I'm the butcher? It's, will anyone even take her seriously if she tries? That assumption is a structural flaw. He underestimates not just her persistence, but her capacity to learn from past failure. Pattern interrupt. While this is happening, Dexter decides it's a great time to start dating a serial poisoner. Enter Hannah McKay. She's not just a love interest, she's a parallel risk vector. Dexter convinces himself he can manage a relationship with another killer, keep Harrison safe, keep Deb pacified, and still outmaneuver Laguerta's investigation. Multiple fronts, one man, one code. What could go wrong? His trajectory shifts from hiding one secret life to juggling several incompatible narratives at once. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to Season 7 because this is where Dexter's systems stop merely evading detection and start being actively decoded. Laguerta follows the slides, the shipping records, the boat. She does what no one else has done. She treats the Bay Harbor butcher like a solvable puzzle instead of a closed file. Along the way, every safeguard Dexter trusted, his job, his trophies, his reputation, turns into a breadcrumb trail for someone determined to prove he's not a guardian monster, but just a monster, and the only way he can stop her will demand the most catastrophic break with the code so far. Laguerta, alone in that shipping container, is the nightmare version of every earlier investigation. No task force, no SWAT team, just a woman with a badge, a theory, and enough evidence to drag Dexter's whole mythology into daylight. Let's kick things off with how methodical she actually is. She doesn't stumble onto Dexter. She builds a case. Estrada's reappearance, the Bay Harbor Butcher dump sites, the boat records, the blood slide at Travis Marshall's scene. Piece by piece, she reconstructs a pattern everyone else wrote off. Where Dokes had instinct, LaGuerta has instinct plus data. And that combination corners both Dexter and Deborah in the one place that mirrors his origin, a shipping container, soaked in memory and implication. Dexter walks in with a plan. As always, he's going to kill Estrada, stage the scene so it looks like LaGuerta tried to execute him, and let Miami Metro discover a tragic shootout between a dirty cop and an old cartel asset. The code is already bending here. He's using a real killer as a prop, not as a moral endpoint. But operationally, he still believes he's in control. Then Deborah arrives, and in a single beat, the entire structure collapses. 2 guns drawn, LaGuerta pleading with Deb to arrest Dexter. Dexter telling Deb to walk away. To keep this clear, this is not a careful deliberation. This is a split-second collision between the code and self-preservation. Does he surrender and face exposure? Does he let LaGuerta live and trust the system he's been mocking for 7 seasons? Or does he do the one thing Harry's rules never allowed? Kill an innocent to preserve the lie. When Dexter pulls the trigger on LaGuerta, the code dies first. He is not eliminating a predator. He is not preventing future victims. He is silencing a successful investigation. The central question from this point on is brutal. If the code can be overridden this easily, was it ever a moral framework, or just a story he told himself to feel less monstrous? In that container, the code isn't guiding him. It's a hollow justification he abandons the second it threatens his freedom. And Deb? Her complicity is its own quiet catastrophe. By choosing Dexter, she destroys her career, her ethics, and the self-image she's built as the cop who does things right. Along the way, Dexter's need to protect her becomes the very thing that corrupts her. This isn't just a relational failure. It's an identity fracture. After LaGuerta, Deb isn't a damaged but principled detective. She's an accessory to murder. Each major section will show a bigger breach, but this is the moral point of no return. From here, Dexter can't plausibly claim his system is about justice. It's about survival. Control is slipping, and he's now willing to kill anyone who reaches for the truth. So what happens when that same logic collides with the one person he claims to love most? His son? So what happens when that survival logic meets Harrison? We jump to season 8, and the answer is Dexter tries to pretend the house isn't already on fire. LaGuerta is dead. Deborah pulled the trigger. The investigation that almost exposed the Bay Harbor Butcher ends in a shipping container with Dexter coaching his sister through murder. From there, we cut to a time jump and a fantasy. Dexter back at work, Harrison growing, Deborah gone. On paper, the plan is simple. One last stretch of killing under control, then a clean exit from Miami. In this video, we're going to treat that as what it really is, a relapse, dressed up as a retirement strategy. Dexter convinces himself he can fix everything by doing what he's always done, just more efficiently. Solve a final big case. Keep the dark passenger on a short leash. Manage Deborah's breakdown on the side. Then disappear with Harrison, as if changing zip codes will erase a lifetime of bodies and lies. It's the same triad we've seen before: operational plan, emotional plan, moral plan. Stalk the new killer, stabilize Deb, protect the kid, leave no evidence. But to keep this clear, look at where Deb actually is when season 8 opens. She's off the force. She's self-medicating. She's sleeping with a suspect in her own private investigation because she no longer trusts the system Dexter hollowed out around her. LaGuerta's death isn't just a bad memory. It's a live wire humming under every choice she makes. Dexter doesn't engage with that psychology. He treats her like a problem statement. Take the early confrontation in the parking lot. Deb is drunk, furious, suicidal. She tells him that killing LaGuerta destroyed her. Dexter's response? Offer to take the blame, then pivot back to his usual reassurance that he can handle it. He frames her trauma as a variable to be managed, not a person shattered by his decisions. The focus is not just on his lack of empathy, it's on his refusal to see that this is a failure his code can't clean up. Then the show drops Dr. Evelyn Vogel into the equation, and the illusion of control gets another crack. From the moment she plays Dexter his own childhood brain scans, we learned the code wasn't a sacred text Harry discovered. It was an experiment she designed. Dexter's entire identity, the thing he thought made him unique and righteous, is reframed as a clinical project to channel a budding psychopath. The central question shifts. Is Dexter a moral avenger or just the most successful lab rat? Suddenly, every ritual feels less like destiny and more like conditioning. Harry's rules, the slides, the plastic, all curated, all part of someone else's plan. Season 8 becomes Dexter's attempt to seize authorship back. If he can close Vogel's case, patch Deborah up, and ride off with Harrison, maybe he proves he was more than their experiment. But along the way, every prior failure is still smoldering under the floorboards. Deb's guilt, Miami Metro's suspicions, the Bay Harbor Butcher files. How long can he pretend this is a controlled exit, not a slow-motion collapse? And what happens when Harrison finally walks into the flames too? Deborah's death is not a twist. It's a receipt. From LaGuerta's body in that shipping container to a ventilator quietly hissing in a hospital room, we're watching a single plan fail in slow motion. Dexter's belief that he can weaponize his darkness and still protect the one person who really knows him. Let's kick things off with that container, because that's where the trajectory actually snaps. When Dexter chooses to kill LaGuerta, he doesn't just break the code by murdering an innocent. He forces Deborah to pull the trigger with him. One shot, one decision. But the consequences radiate through everything that follows. Deborah's substance abuse, her career implosion, her wrecked psychology. She quits Miami Metro, sleeps on a filthy mattress, drinks herself numb, and keeps replaying the investigation she sabotaged. Every time she looks at Dexter, she sees the Bay Harbor Butcher and the woman she executed to save him. To keep this clear, this isn't random character decay. It's a chain of operational and relational failures. Dexter's plan to neutralize LaGuerta without fallout collapses, and Deborah becomes the fallout. Her judgment is compromised. She hides evidence, lies to colleagues, clings to Dexter even as she hates him. By the time we reach Saxon, Deb is already a walking crime scene created by her brother's choices. Then the hospital sequence hits, a chaotic shootout, Deborah bleeding on the pavement, emergency surgery under harsh fluorescent lights, For a moment, Dexter's old narrative tries to reassert itself. He tells himself he can still salvage something, that if Deb survives, maybe this season of disaster can be patched over like all the others. He visits her bed, talks about a future where he leaves with Hannah and Harrison, as if he can simply edit Deborah into a safe corner of that plan. But the central question crashes back when the stroke drops her into a vegetative state. What does control even mean now? Dexter walks into that room, looks at the monitors, and realizes there is no code that covers this. No target to stalk. No investigation to outsmart. Just the sister he dragged through his darkness, trapped in a body that will never wake up. His decision to unplug her and wheel her out is both mercy and domination. On the surface, it's compassion. He refuses to let her live like that. Underneath, it's one last assertion of control over her fate, turning Deborah herself into a final body at sea. He wraps her, carries her, onto the boat, and drops her into the water, the same way he's disposed of every consequence he didn't want to face. In that moment, the focus is not just on Deborah dying. It's on Dexter's protector fantasy dying with her. The one person he most wanted to shield is destroyed precisely because he tried to shield her through lies, murder, and manipulation. Miami Dexter effectively ends there. The storm, the fake death, the self-imposed exile as a lumberjack. Those aren't fresh starts. They're the movements of a man running from a life already in ruins. And yet, as we'll see when we jump to Iron Lake, you can change the setting, the name, even the code. But if you never confront the original collapse, the same pattern is waiting under the snow. We cut from the hurricane's chaos to something deceptively calm, snow falling on endless trees, a bearded man in flannel hauling logs in silence. On paper, it looks like a clean break. In practice, it's Dexter's most elaborate fantasy of control yet. Let's kick things off with the plan itself. Dexter crashes the boat, fakes his death, abandons Harrison and Hannah, and disappears into a nameless lumber camp. Distance as detox, isolation as a new code. He believes that if he strips away Miami, the blood slides, the investigation pressure, even the language of the dark passenger, the urge will simply evaporate. No temptations, no targets, no kills, no problem. But the focus is not just on geography, it's on psychology. Dexter is treating murder like a bad habit tied to a zip code, not a compulsive system he built to manage his need for control and for connection on his own terms. He swaps scalpels for chainsaws, kill rooms for cabins, night stalking for night shifts. But the underlying circuitry is the same: rigid routine, emotional distance, and a private myth that he is protecting others by staying apart. To keep this clear, think about what he's really running from. He's not just fleeing Miami Metro. He's fleeing the ghosts stacked behind every necessary decision. Rita in the bathtub because he misread Trinity and played with his prey. Dokes burned alive after Dexter framed him as the Bay Harbor butcher and let Lila finish the job. Lagerta on the shipping container floor, an innocent sacrificed when Dexter chose survival over his own code. Deborah pulled into his world piece by piece until she's killing Lagerta for him and bleeding out in a hospital bed because he couldn't stop. How do you exile yourself from that? You don't. You just stop talking about it. This is where the illusion gets sharp. In this video, we're going to keep returning to the central question. Is Dexter changing? Or is he just changing scenery? The lumberjack years answer that brutally. He hasn't confronted Harry's experiment, Vogel's diagnosis, the way every season of his life ended in collapse. He has not grieved. He has not confessed. He has not accepted consequences. He has simply pressed pause in a place with fewer witnesses. And that's exactly why this ending is really a staging area for new blood. Each major section will show that by the time we reach Iron Lake, nothing essential has shifted. The dark passenger has a new name. The code has been downgraded to a personal promise, but the pattern is identical. Build a controlled routine. Deny the past. Believe this time will be different. Pattern interrupt. What if the most dangerous thing Dexter ever did was not kill, but stop? The lumberjack exile isn't redemption. It's a holding pattern, a failed attempt at control through withdrawal that only delays the inevitable reckoning waiting in the snow, in Harrison's eyes, and in Angela's investigation. Because when he finally steps out of those woods, he's not a new man. He's the same man, with a longer list of things he refuses to face. So, when we cut from the lumberjack, fade out to Iron Lake's crisp, white opening shots, it's framed like a miracle. Snowmobiles instead of crime scenes, a sporting goods store instead of a blood-spattered lab. Jim Lindsay, mild-mannered clerk, jogging the same route every morning, punching the same time card, reciting the same internal mantra. No killing, no entanglements, no deviations from the routine. On the surface, it looks like Dexter finally won the war. He's built a life that is all plan, no impulse. He tracks deer, not targets. He counts days without a kill, the way a recovering addict counts days of sobriety. In his psychology, the past isn't just distant, it's sealed off, quarantined behind a new name and a new zip code. Miami is a closed chapter. The code is retired. The dark passenger is managed through structure and abstinence. But watch the details, and that supposed control starts to flicker. The strict rules he lives by in Iron Lake are just Harry's code, with the serial numbers filed off. Don't get caught. Don't get close. Don't make a mess. He still stalks. He still surveils. He still rehearses contingencies in his head. The only difference is that in this season, the prey is himself. Every shift at the store, every night in that isolated cabin, is a kill room built to contain his own urges rather than someone else's. To keep this clear, Iron Lake is not a fresh start. It's a rebranded containment strategy. His relationship with Angela proves it. On paper, she's the perfect cover. Small-town police chief, emotionally grounded, no connection to Miami. In practice, she's a walking investigation risk. The more he integrates into the community, helping at the station, joking with the regulars at the bar, showing up at town events, the more surfaces there are for the old Dexter to accidentally reflect off. We can feel how fragile this setup is every time someone asks a basic question. Where did you live before? Any family? Why, Lindsay. Each answer is a tiny improvisation layered over a decade of lies. One wrong detail, one bored background check, and the whole identity collapses. The focus is not just on whether he kills again, but on how long this intricate performance can hold before reality taps the glass. And then Harrison walks into the snow. The central question of New Blood arrives in the shape of a teenage boy with his mother's eyes and Dexter's trauma. Harrison is the first major crack in Jim Lindsay's mask because he demands something the Iron Lake plan was never built to handle: connection without deception. Does Dexter stay Jim, keep the distance, preserve the structure? Or does he reach for his son and resurrect everything he claimed to bury? Along the way, every old failure pattern resurfaces. Operationally, he's rusty the second he breaks his no-kill rule. Relationally, his bond with Angela and Harrison pulls him into the same triangle of secrets that destroyed Deb. Existentially, Iron Lake exposes the lie that geography equals change. New Blood isn't a new trajectory. It's the original collapse replayed under fresh snow with a smaller town, sharper scrutiny, and far less room to hide. And once Harrison is here, the next failure isn't a matter of if. It's a matter of which rule breaks first. And once Harrison is here, the next failure isn't a matter of if. It's a matter of which rule breaks first. New Blood answers that almost immediately, with the one thing Dexter swore he wouldn't do: kill again. Matt Caldwell walks into Iron Lake like a stress test for every safeguard Dexter has built. Entitled Rich Kid, Hit and Run Killer, drunk with a rifle in a town that lives off the woods. He's the perfect storm, reckless enough to be dangerous, protected enough to be untouchable, and exactly the kind of predator the code would once have painted in neon. To keep this clear, Matt isn't just annoying. He's a live demonstration of the same injustice that birthed the Bay Harbor Butcher in the first place. We watch Dexter's psychology grind against itself. On one side, the Iron Lake plan. No kills, no blood, no ritual, just isolation and self-denial. On the other side, the old reflex. Stalk the target, confirm the victims, restore control. The central question in those early episodes isn't, will Matt die? It's, will Dexter keep his promise to himself when the universe hands him a textbook, code-worthy monster? The answer comes in the kill room disguised as a hunting cabin, when Matt brags about killing 5 people on that boating accident and getting away with it. In this video, we're going to keep returning to that hinge, the moment when outrage overrides strategy. Dexter doesn't kill Matt because it's tactically wise. He kills him because he can't tolerate a world where Matt walks free in front of Harrison. Justice, control, fatherhood, the code. They all fuse into one impulsive decision, and the second he swings that knife, the Iron Lake identity collapses. Jim Lindsay dies on that table too. Operationally, it's a mess. There's no long investigation, no meticulous pattern, just a rushed setup, a body dismembered in the snow, and a man who hasn't practiced in a decade improvising under pressure. The deer cam catches him chasing the white buck. The gunshot echoes. The missing person report hits a town where everybody knows Matt. His father is loaded, and disappearances don't blend into big city noise. Dexter thinks he's back in control, but the environment has changed. Small town, tight web, fewer places to hide a single bad decision. And this time, the investigation is run by someone who actually sees him. Angela Bishop isn't LaGuerta, half distracted by politics, or Miami Metro, numbed by volume. She's focused, methodical, and emotionally invested in Matt's case. She notices the inconsistencies, the footprints, the surveillance. She Googles Bay Harbor Butcher. Along the way, we realize Angela does what Miami never did. She treats Dexter as a variable, not a constant. Matt's death is the stone that starts the avalanche. Once the no-kill rule breaks, every other boundary erodes faster than Dexter can patch it. Harrison's arrival, Angela's suspicion, Kurt Caldwell's response, all of it cascades from that one impulsive kill. And the next time Dexter loses control in Iron Lake, it won't just threaten his cover, it will weaponize his son. Harrison doesn't just arrive in Iron Lake, he detonates in it. From the second he steps off that bus, we can feel the investigation shifting. Dexter's not stalking a target or cleaning up a crime scene. He's staring at a living consequence. A teenager with his eyes, his trauma, and possibly his hunger. The central question stops being, can Dexter avoid getting caught? And becomes, can Dexter keep his son from becoming him? Let's kick things off with Harrison's psychology. This is a kid who was left in the aftermath of Rita's murder, shipped off, abandoned, and then abandoned again when Dexter faked his death. That double disappearance calcifies into three things: abandonment rage, latent violence, and a sharp, defensive intelligence. When he pulls a knife at school, when he slices that bully's leg, in a way that looks more surgical than impulsive, we're not just seeing a troubled teen. We're seeing someone who has inherited Dexter's darkness, but not his illusions about control. To keep this clear, Dexter's initial plan is textbook denial, reconnect, but on his terms. He feeds Harrison half-truths about Miami, about Rita, about why he left. He tries to bond over breakfast, wrestling, normal father-son activities. Anything that keeps them in the daylight and away from the code. He offers sentiment without substance, presence without confession. It's a relational kill room. Plastic-wrapped honesty with just enough gaps to keep the monster out of sight. But Harrison is not Deborah, Rita, or even Miguel. He's faster, sharper, less willing to be managed. Along the way, he keeps catching the seams in Dexter's story, the way Dexter flinches at talk of blood, the way he knows too much about trauma patterns, the way his eyes go distant when violence is mentioned, like he's running an internal crime scene. Harrison doesn't just feel abandoned, he feels studied, and that is a devastating shift in the family dynamic. We watch multiple micro-failures play out. Dexter withholds his history to protect Harrison, yet he also tests the waters, probing for signs of a dark passenger he can mentor, hide the monster, or teach the code. Every conversation tilts between those poles. When Harrison opens up about feeling broken, Dexter almost confesses, then retreats behind, "You're not like me." That is not reassurance. It's gaslighting dressed as comfort. The focus is not just on Dexter misreading his son. It's on how Harrison refuses the fantasy that this can be a clean, controlled apprenticeship. He calls out Dexter's emotional absence. He questions the story of Dexter's accident. He senses that the man preaching restraint is also thrilled by his violent potential. And once Harrison links his own pain to Dexter's secrets, the trajectory of new blood locks in. Because if every earlier relationship failure cost Dexter a friend, a lover, a sister, this one threatens something bigger. Harrison isn't just another variable in Dexter's plan. He's the one person capable of turning Dexter's entire mythology into evidence. And he's not the only one watching. Because while Harrison is decoding Dexter's psychology up close, Angela Bishop is running a parallel investigation from the outside using tools and habits that Dexter has never truly had to face. In this video, we're going to treat her as what Miami Metro never quite became, a focused, modern counterforce to the Bay Harbor butcher. Let's kick things off with the moment everything cracks open for her. A girl, a small-town chief, a boyfriend who just happens to be great at tracking blood. Angela's search for the Iron Lake runaways looks routine, but that database ping on a long-dead name is the real turning point. An anonymous email, a link to an obituary, a grainy photo of Dexter Morgan next to the face of Jim Lindsay. From a laptop screen in upstate New York, the ghost of Miami suddenly has a zip code again. To keep this clear, Angela doesn't start with a grand theory about serial killers and codes. She starts with a mother's panic and a cop's pattern recognition. She runs online records, sees that Dexter died in a hurricane, and then stands in front of Jim Lindsay's face every night, watching how he lies. The focus is not just on what the records say, but on how his story never quite fits the data. Where Miami Metro had institutional inertia, rotating task forces, and a backlog of fresh bodies, Angela has time. She has one missing girl, one suspicious boyfriend, and a personal stake sharpened by years of living with grief in a town too small to lose anyone quietly. So she goes further. She pulls old Miami articles, Bay Harbor butcher coverage, victim lists. She looks at how those bodies were wrapped, how they vanished into water, how the investigation stalled right where Dexter's career intersected the crime scenes. Then she walks those patterns into Iron Lake. Runaway girls who never use their phones again. A wealthy recluse with a private cabin. A deer shot in a way that makes no hunting sense. Modern forensics turns her hunch into leverage, matching screw marks, ballistics, travel records, even Google searches. Each anomaly that Dexter thinks he's contained becomes another echo of Miami. And here's the central question. Why does this small town chief get closer than an entire homicide division? Because Dexter miscalculates. He assumes the same manipulation plan that worked on Lagerta and Deb will work on Angela, and play the caring boyfriend, offer just enough forensic insight to seem helpful, gaslight her about her own instincts. But every deflection tightens the net. When he lies about his name, she prints the obituary. When he dismisses the butcher theory, she flies to Miami and sits across from Angel Batista. When he tries to redirect her toward Kurt Caldwell, she checks travel records and realizes both men orbit the same disappearances. Each major section of her investigation escalates, not because she's obsessed with Dexter, but because Dexter keeps giving her new reasons to be. Along the way, his illusion of control shrinks to the size of an interrogation room. And the next time, Angela closes a door behind him. It isn't just a conversation about a deer. It's a trap built from every failure he thought he left in the ocean. The real collapse begins when someone else finally sees that whole pattern and refuses to look away. The real collapse begins when someone else finally sees that whole pattern and refuses to look away. But in Iron Lake, that someone else isn't just Angela. It's Kurt Caldwell, a predator who doesn't want to expose Dexter's darkness. He wants to compete with it. Let's kick things off with how familiar Kurt feels at first. Wealthy, local hero. Secret hunting ground. A ritualized pattern of stalking, abducting, and displaying his victims like trophies in that underground mausoleum of frozen girls. To Dexter, this is textbook, a small-town version of the monsters he used to bag in Miami. The plan, in his mind, is simple. Identify the ritual, confirm the victims, prepare the kill room. One more problem neatly removed. In this video, we're going to track how that confidence becomes its own blindfold. Dexter assumes he can run a classic Miami-style operation under a new name, in a town where everyone knows everyone and rumors travel faster than patrol cars. He thinks he can isolate Kurt, neutralize him, and still keep Harrison Angela, and his cover identity, separated by clean psychological walls. To keep this clear, Dexter believes geography has changed, not the rules of the game. Kurt immediately proves him wrong by attacking the one variable Dexter can't compartmentalize: Harrison. Instead of stalking Dexter in the woods, he stalks Dexter's son at the diner, at the truck stop, on the baseball field. He feeds Harrison praise, money, and, most dangerously, validation for his violent impulses. Where Dexter offers rules and distance, Kurt offers attention and understanding. Who feels more like a father to a kid who thinks he was abandoned? The cat and mouse dynamic that follows is not just two killers circling each other. It's two different theories of control colliding in a glass town. Dexter underestimates how much influence Kurt has. Cameras, employees, a lifetime of goodwill, the ability to disappear for business trips that are really hunting expeditions. Kurt underestimates Dexter's capacity to adapt and kill under pressure. Both men assume the other's reach is smaller than it is. Both are wrong. Pattern interrupt. Notice who actually does the serious investigation here. It isn't Dexter. It's Angela, following missing girls, old cases, and tire tracks, while the two predators posture. The central question becomes, whose plan is really driving Harrison's trajectory? Dexter's code, Kurt's grooming, or Angela's insistence on truth? When Dexter and Harrison finally descend into Kurt's bunker, the illusion shatters, wall after wall of preserved bodies, faces frozen mid-fear. Years of hunting that Dexter never saw, right under his nose. This isn't just the scale of Kurt's crimes, it's a mirror of everything Dexter has tried to keep Harrison away from, now reflected back at him in fluorescent lighting. Harrison doesn't just hear about monsters. He walks through a museum of them, guided by his father. That exposure doesn't bind him to Dexter's code, it destabilizes it. And once Harrison has seen both Kurt's ritual and Dexter's response, the next loss of control won't stay in a bunker. It's going to happen in daylight, fluorescent bulbs, Harrison watching. The museum tour of monsters doesn't end in Kurt's bunker. It moves straight into a police station. Because the next time Dexter loses control, there are no shadows to hide in. Just holding cells, security cameras, and a town that finally starts asking the right questions. Let's kick things off with the basic failure of the Iron Lake plan. Dexter thinks he's done the impossible. New name, low profile. No more blood slides. But once Angela connects Jim Lindsay to the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation and arrests him, the fantasy of control collapses. In that interrogation room, with Logan hovering and Angela laying out the evidence from Miami and Iron Lake, we watch the psychology flip. Dexter isn't the hunter analyzing a target. He is the target, dissected by a cop who actually does the work Miami Metro never finished. The central question in that room is simple. Can Dexter talk his way out one more time? He tries every old move. Gaslighting, half-truths, emotional leverage. When Angela confronts him with the ketamine pattern and the Bay Harbor bodies, we see the old Season 1 confidence crack. For the first time in New Blood, his voice, his posture, his entire plan is reactive. And then comes the jail cell. Logan, the nice guy coach, the one adult Harrison actually respects, the only thing between Dexter and escape. To keep this clear, Logan is not a predator. He's not a killer. He's law enforcement, but not LaGuerta, not Dokes, not someone circling Dexter with lethal intent. He's a regular cop doing his job. Dexter calls him in, stages a fake choking, and when Logan won't hand over the gun, Dexter lunges. The struggle is clumsy, panicked, utterly un-Dexter. No plastic, no preparation, no ritual. A snapped neck against iron bars, a gunshot echoing through the station. This isn't the code. This is a cornered animal. In this video, we're going to keep returning to this distinction. Strategic violence versus impulsive violence. Killing Logan obliterates Dexter's long-standing operational rule against killing innocents and cops who aren't on his table. Remember, even with Lagerta, he wrapped the murder in a twisted justification, folding her into the code by convincing Deb she was a threat that had to die. With Logan, there isn't even that thin moral story. The only victim he's protecting is himself. The focus is not just on the brutality, but on the sloppiness. Blood on the floor, a missing officer, a dead body in a police facility, with Dexter as the only obvious suspect. He leaves a trail of consequences that any basic investigation could follow. Operationally, this is worse than the Bay Harbor butcher exposure, because there he at least tried to frame Dokes. Here, he doesn't even bother with a plan, and Harrison sees it. He hears what happened. He connects the coach who believed in him with the father who snapped that man's neck to save his own skin. Whatever moral high ground Dexter claimed about the code, about only killing those who deserve it, dies in that cell with Logan. This is the final operational failure. Dexter is no longer the meticulous Bay Harbor butcher. He's a fugitive who just murdered the one cop his son liked. Where can the code possibly go after that? The answer arrives in the snow, with a rifle, and with Harrison forced to decide which monster actually needs to be stopped. The snow is blinding. Sirens distant, trees skeletal, breath hanging in the air between a father and a son who have run out of lies. In that frozen clearing, Dexter is no longer the hidden predator of Miami Nights. He's a bleeding fugitive on his knees, facing the one person he cannot outmaneuver. Harrison's rifle doesn't just point at Dexter's chest, it points at the entire trajectory of the show. Logan's body is still metaphorically warm, the last in a chain that stretches back through Iron Lake, through Deborah, through Lagerta and Dokes, all the way to the cargo container and Harry's first investigation. To keep this clear, the scene is simple. One gun, two people, a lifetime of consequences, pressing down on the trigger. Harrison lays it out with a moral clarity Dexter has spent 10 seasons dodging. Logan wasn't a monster. Logan was a good man. The code was supposed to prevent that. Dexter insists it was an accident, a necessity, part of the plan to escape. But Harrison sees the pattern. Dexter refuses to name. Every time the code is threatened, Dexter bends it, then breaks it, then kills whoever stands in the way. The focus is not just on this one dead cop, it's on Rita, on Lundy, on Deborah, spiraling after the church, on every exception that proves the rule. In this video, we're going to treat Harrison's perspective as the final investigation the series never gave us on paper. He connects the dots the way Laguerta tried to. He understands instinctively the psychology of this collapse. The code is not a shield for the innocent. It's a story Dexter tells himself so he can keep killing. When Harrison says, "You're the same as the people you kill," he's not being dramatic. He's delivering the verdict Harry never had the courage to state out loud. And Dexter hears it, really hears it. This is the existential break the series has been circling since Harry's suicide. In that clearing, Dexter realizes he has become exactly the kind of killer the code was designed to prevent. He murdered LaGuerta to save himself. He let Trinity roam to feed the thrill. He killed Logan as a logistical shortcut. The central question isn't whether he can get away this time. It's whether he deserves to. So he does the one thing he has never done in any season. He gives up control. Dexter doesn't lunge, doesn't manipulate, doesn't run. He guides Harrison's shaking hands onto the gun, positions the barrel over his heart, and tells his son this is the only way. Operational failure, relational failure, moral failure, all distilled into a single choice. Teach Harrison how to live by showing him that Dexter must die. Each major section will bring us to a breaking point, but this is the only one where Dexter himself acknowledges the monster. Harrison pulls the trigger, and with that shot, the code ends, the illusion ends. The story Dexter thought he was telling about himself ends. But if this is the conclusion of his myth, what exactly has Harrison inherited in its place? If Harrison inherits anything, it's not a heroic mission. It's a blueprint of failure. Because when we zoom out from the finale and trace Dexter's operational record, a pattern emerges that's a lot less perfect predator and a lot more barely contained collapse. Let's kick things off with the cage in the Everglades. Dokes locked away, plastic wrapped, the code supposedly in control. Dexter's plan is simple. Hold him, frame him, walk away clean. But the central question isn't how clever the frame-up is. It's how many wild cards he refuses to plan for. Lila finds the cabin. She blows it up. Dokes dies, not as a calculated move, but as collateral in Dexter's improvisation. The investigation closes, but the cost is enormous. A volatile arsonist now obsessed with him, and a lesson learned in exactly the wrong direction, that chaos can still deliver him a win. From there, the same blind spots keep repeating. Lila's intervention in Season 2, Trinity's escape in Season 4, the Barrel Girl's near miss in Season 5. Different killers, same flaw. Dexter underestimates timing, assumes privacy where there is none, and treats other people as static pieces on his board, rather than agents with their own trajectories. Trinity walks out of Dexter's kill room fantasy because Dexter wants one more ritual, one more confirmation. By the time he corrects the plan, Rita is dead. That's not just emotional tragedy, it's operational arrogance cashing out. To keep this clear, the focus is not just on the big deaths, but on the small miscalculations that lead there. The Barrel Girl's case should be clean. Boyd dead, barrels discovered, Lumen protected. Instead, Dexter leaves traces, arrives late, scrambles to adjust when Lumen refuses to disappear back into anonymity. Every patch he applies generates another leak. We watch him switch from planner to juggler, and every extra ball in the air pulls another person into danger. His forensic knowledge, which should be his safeguard, often makes him sloppy. He trusts his cleanup skills to erase blood, fibers, trajectories, as if the real problem is always evidence, never design. The church rooftop with Travis Marshall is a perfect example. Dexter assumes the abandoned church is his private cathedral of control. No one will come. No one will see. And then Deb walks in at the exact wrong second. The failure isn't the stab itself. It's the assumption that his city, his workplace, his own sister will behave according to his mental blueprint. By the time we reach Logan's death in New Blood, the pattern is complete. Dexter kills a cop not because the code demands it, but because his whole plan has collapsed and he's out of options. Improvisation has narrowed into pure panic. How many times have we seen this arc already? Initial control, unforeseen variable, rushed adjustment, widening consequences. In this video, we're going to keep lining these failures up, because once we do, the myth of Dexter as a flawless killer disintegrates. His survival is less about mastery and more about luck, other people's blind spots, and an investigation culture that keeps missing what's right in front of it. The question we have to ask next is brutal. If the plans are this broken, what does that say about the code that built them? If Dexter's plans look fragile on the operational level, they're downright doomed once other people walk in. The investigation that really destroys him isn't LaGuardia's or Angela's. It's the ongoing, messy, uncontrollable investigation called having relationships. Let's kick things off with Rita, because she's Dexter's first big experiment in the family fantasy. On paper, she's a perfect cover, traumatized, gentle, not asking too many questions. But the moment Dexter starts to actually care, the code stops being his primary algorithm. He toys with Trinity instead of eliminating him, trying to understand this family man killer and extend the game. That delay is pure emotion over strategy. And the consequence is Rita in the bathtub, Harrison in blood, and Dexter realizing that his desire for connection just painted a target on the people he loves. Deborah is where that pattern becomes inescapable. To keep this clear, Dexter keeps telling himself he can protect Deb while never fully trusting her, never fully telling her the truth. He wants intimacy without vulnerability, partnership without transparency, protection without honesty. The night she walks into the church and sees him kill Travis Marshall, that whole plan collapses in one frame. From there, every choice he makes for Deb, covering up, gaslighting, dragging her into his world, is driven less by logic and more by panic and guilt. The central question becomes not how do I avoid detection, but how do I keep Deb from breaking? And in the end, he loses both. She disintegrates psychologically, then dies as collateral in his war with Saxon. Along the way, the substitutes and side partners underline the same flaw. Leela is Dexter's attempt to be seen in his darkness, without any code at all. He shows her too much, too fast, and she responds with arson, murder, and an obsessive fixation that forces him into yet another kill. Miguel starts as a controlled apprenticeship, but Dexter withholds the full rules, then flatters himself that he can shape Miguel's psychology. Miguel's rampage is the receipt for that arrogance. Lumen offers a brief illusion of balance, shared mission, mutual trauma, but when her need for vengeance ends, the relationship evaporates, exposing how conditional Dexter's version of connection really is. Hannah and Harrison bring this into New Blood's trajectory. Hannah is the fantasy of a partner who already shares his darkness, so he skips the careful boundaries entirely. He entrusts Harrison to her, then disappears, as if love alone will stabilize the situation. By Iron Lake, Harrison's disillusionment is the final relational failure. He wants honesty, accountability, a father who can admit what he is. Dexter offers half-truths and rationalizations. Angela, meanwhile, is the inverse of Rita, sharp, principled, running an investigation in her head from the moment things stop adding up. Dexter underestimates her because he's always underestimated the power of the people he loves to redraw his lines. The focus is not just on who dies, but on how each relationship tightens the narrative noose. Rita's murder Deb's breakdown, Miguel's spiral, Leila's chaos, Harrison's rejection. These aren't side plots. They're the mechanism by which the code loses all authority. And the brutal setup for the next phase is this. Once the people closest to Dexter stop believing the myth, how long can any of his plans hold? Once the people closest to Dexter stop believing the myth, everything shifts. The investigation isn't just out there anymore. It's happening inside his own head. The central question becomes, can Dexter keep living as the necessary monster once reality keeps proving that story wrong? To keep this clear, we can track the existential failures, like fault lines running through his trajectory. Brian's revelation in Season 1 is the first major crack. In a freezer bathed in fluorescent blue, Brian doesn't just expose their shared childhood trauma. He offers Dexter a different identity, not Harry's project, but a born predator whose real family is the blood. Dexter chooses the code over Brian, but notice the psychology. He has to kill his own brother while pretending to himself it's an act of protection for Deb, not a rejection of who he really is. The plan is to affirm the code. The effect is to bury a massive doubt. Then Trinity blows that doubt wide open. Dexter's long game with Arthur Mitchell is built on the fantasy that he can study evil, copy its longevity, and still control the consequences. Rita's body in the bathtub is the verdict on that plan. He didn't contain a monster. He played with one. The code told him he could juggle family and ritual if he just followed the rules. Reality answers with a murdered wife and a blood-soaked Harrison. From that point on, every time Dexter narrates himself as a protector, we can feel the gap between his words and the world. Lagerta's murder is the moment the code dies on contact with circumstance. In this video, we're going to keep coming back to this scene because it's the purest example of narrative collapse. Lagerta is innocent. She's right. She's following the evidence, and Dexter's response is not righteous curation of evil. It's a cornered animal eliminating a threat. When Deb pulls the trigger, Dexter immediately reframes it as tragic necessity, another sacrifice to keep the greater good intact. But we've all seen what actually happened. The code has been broken so completely that his internal monologue sounds less like a rulebook and more like damage control. Deborah's death is the emotional version of the same failure. From the church with Travis Marshall to her final hospital bed, Dexter keeps insisting that his presence is a twisted form of love. Yet every plan he makes to save Deb, lying, killing, running, only accelerates her collapse. When he shuts off her life support and sails into the storm, he describes it as ending the cycle. What we're watching is escape, denial, and the birth of another mask. By New Blood, that mask is so fragile that one honest teenager can shatter it. Dexter flees to Iron Lake, reinvents himself, and reframes his killing as small-town protection and justice. But Harrison doesn't buy the brand. He calls out the pattern, the bodies, the collateral, the way Dexter's rules always bend when he's threatened. Their final confrontation is not just a son judging a father. It's Dexter hearing his own narration cross-examined for the first time. And once Harrison names the truth out loud, what plan does Dexter have left? Because the next phase isn't about whether he can kill and get away with it. It's about what happens when the story itself is the crime scene. If the story is the crime scene, then Harry's code is the original set of forged lab results. It looks precise, It sounds scientific, but once we start testing it against reality, the whole thing starts to leak. To keep this clear, let's kick things off by breaking down what Harry actually gives Dexter. 4 pillars. Don't get caught. Only kill those who deserve it. Blend in. Channel the urge into a ritualized system. On paper, it's a plan for control. Stalk, verify, prepare, clean. No witnesses, no evidence, no doubts. In Harry's mind, that structure turns a chaotic compulsion into something almost manageable. And for a while, it works. At least, it looks like it does. In Season 1, Dexter's blood slides line up neatly. His kill rooms vanish without a trace. And Miami Metro's investigation never points inward. The code gives him a language for his psychology, a mission that makes him feel less like a random predator and more like an avenging instrument. The central question, though, is whether that feeling of purpose is protection or just another layer of self-hypnosis. Because the code has blind spots baked into its DNA. It assumes Dexter can stay emotionally detached. It assumes the world won't change faster than Harry's training. It assumes deserving it is a stable category instead of a moving target that keeps expanding every time Dexter feels cornered. There's nothing in those rules about what happens when the killer has a wife, a child, a sister who loves him, or when forensic science evolves beyond Harry's imagination. Look at Dokes. Dexter follows the code. He doesn't kill an innocent man. He imprisons him instead, clinging to the letter of the rule while violating its spirit. That rigidity creates a new vulnerability. Lila steps in, kills Dokes, and frames him as the Bay Harbor Butcher. Dexter obeys the code and still triggers a catastrophe that nearly exposes him and permanently stains Rita's life with suspicion and grief. Then flip it. When Dexter breaks the code, the collapse accelerates. With La Guerta in Season 7, he abandons only those who deserve it to protect himself and Deb. One innocent body on his table, and the moral scaffolding of the entire system falls away. Deb's psyche implodes, the investigation tightens, and from that moment on, every kill is just damage control. Here's the pattern interrupt. What if Harry's code is less secure and more a slow-acting poison? It doesn't resolve Dexter's need for control or his desperate, unspoken need for connection. It just delays the reckoning. Each relationship, Rita, Lumen, Hannah, Harrison, pushes him into situations the code never anticipated, where blend in means lying better and don't get caught means sacrificing more people to keep the narrative intact. In this video, we're going to keep tracking that trajectory because the focus is not just on the rules Dexter recites, but on what happens every time life asks a question the code was never written to answer. And that's where the physics of Dexter's life really start to matter. This isn't just a man with urges and a code. It's a load-bearing lie that keeps getting heavier every season until collapse isn't a twist, it's gravity. Day to day, Dexter is running a full-time shell game. Forensic analyst at Miami Metro, where every blood spatter report feeds the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation. Boyfriend, then husband, to Rita, selling the story of a gentle, damaged man who just needs space. Brother to Deb, pretending to be the one stable thing in her chaos. Later, father to Harrison, mentor to Miguel, partner to Hannah. Each role demands time, attention, emotional performance. Each one is another spinning plate he can't afford to drop. To keep this clear, think about how the roles stack. With Rita, Dexter adds the suburban fantasy, school events, barbecues, late-night feedings. With Harrison, the stakes jump again, because now every late-night kill isn't just about a victim. It's about leaving a baby without a father. With Miguel, he experiments with being a dark mentor, trying to scale the code. With Hannah, he tries intimacy with someone who sees the monster and loves it anyway. The central question becomes, how many identities can one man manage before the mask rips? We see the strain leak out in tiny, lethal ways. Dexter literally falls asleep at the wheel after juggling night shifts, stalking Trinity, and pretending everything is fine at home, crashing his car with Harrison in the back seat. He misses family events for kills, slipping away from Harrison's party to chase a target, convincing himself that protecting his normal life requires abandoning it in the moment. At work, distraction bleeds into the investigation. He contaminates crime scenes, overlooks details, lets Trinity walk away from an early encounter because he's too busy savoring the hunt to notice the danger. From a baby monitor buzzing in the background of a kill prep to Rita calling his phone while he's wrapping plastic, the show keeps stitching domestic images to operational failure. These are not rare exceptions. These are the rule. The more Dexter invests in the fantasy of normalcy, the more catastrophic every slip becomes, because suddenly there are people in the blast radius who have no idea they're standing on a fault line. Rita's death is the clearest example. Dexter plays cat and mouse with Trinity, indulging in the psychology of the chase instead of neutralizing the threat. The delay costs Rita her life and leaves Harrison in blood, repeating Dexter's origin trauma. Later, LaGuerta's investigation forces him to choose between the code and exposure, and he kills her in that shipping container, dragging Deb directly into the moral collapse he'd always tried to quarantine. In this video, we're going to keep watching how each added role doesn't stabilize Dexter. It destabilizes the entire structure, because a double life isn't just stressful. It's a rigged system where every new attachment turns a private failure of control into a public catastrophe waiting to happen. Every time Dexter adds a new relationship to stabilize his life, he also adds a new variable he doesn't understand. Not because he lacks data, but because he misreads the people generating it. He can catalog blood spatter in seconds, yet he cannot accurately read the hearts of the people standing right in front of him. Let's kick things off with the pattern. Dexter consistently overestimates his difference and underestimates everyone else. He believes his psychology is alien, his mind uniquely compartmentalized, his control superior. That belief becomes a filter. To keep this clear, we can watch him misread Deborah's resilience, Dokes' persistence, Miguel's ambition, Leela's instability, LaGuerta's intuition, Angela's competence, and Harrison's moral compass, all in the same way. He assumes they won't see as much, feel as deeply, or connect dots as ruthlessly as he does. Take Deborah. Dexter treats her as emotionally fragile but strategically harmless, someone he can protect with half-truths. Yet she survives Brian, Lundy's death, the revelation about Harry, and finally witnessing Dexter kill Travis Marshall in that church. Her collapse into addiction and moral confusion isn't weakness. It's the cost of absorbing more truth than Dexter ever intended to share. He misreads her resilience as a buffer. It becomes a fuse. With Dokes, the failure is pure persistence. Dexter reads him as a hothead who will burn out or get himself reassigned. Instead, Dokes stalks him with relentless focus, spots the blood slides, and drives the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation straight at Dexter's front door. The plan to frame Dokes only exists because Dexter didn't believe anyone's instincts could be that unshakable. He thought intimidation and misdirection would be enough. They weren't. Miguel and Lila expose a different blind spot. Dexter projects his own compartmentalization onto them. He thinks Miguel can treat killing as a professional side project, a controlled apprenticeship under the code. Miguel can't. Ambition takes over. He personalizes the power, goes off script, and forces Dexter into another kill he never planned. Lila is the same structure in reverse. He imagines a thrilling, disposable affair. She fuses sex, worship, and violence into one obsession, burns his life down, and removes Dokes on her own terms. Dexter keeps assuming other people can separate roles and emotions like he thinks he does. They keep proving they can't. LaGuerta and Angela are the institutional version of that mistake. He dismisses LaGuerta's intuition as political theater until she reconstructs his trajectory from Bay Harbor to the shipyard. He treats Angela as small-town law, underestimating her competence, her access to modern forensics, and her willingness to reopen Miami's cold cases. Both women turn what he thought were closed chapters into active investigations. And then there's Harrison. Dexter believes his son will accept the code as a rational solution, the same way Dexter did. But Harrison's moral compass rejects the entire premise. He doesn't want controlled killing. He wants the killing to stop. That misreading doesn't just break a plan, it ends the story. Along the way, we see the central question forming. What happens when a man who can read every crime scene can't read a single person correctly? The next collapse answers that, more brutally than any blood spatter report. That question stops being theoretical the moment Dexter's failures stop happening in the dark. Early on, the collapse is contained. A bad dump site here, a near miss there, a body that almost surfaces, but doesn't. By New Blood, the failures are community events. To keep this clear, we can track the trajectory from clean rooms to public disasters. In season 1 and 2, Dexter's mistakes are intimate, almost private. Dokes following him to a dock, a blood slide out of place. The Bay Harbor Butcher investigation building, quietly off the very trophies Dexter thought proved his control. Even when it explodes in a cabin in the Everglades. Dokes dies alone. Lila burns the problem away. Miami Metro gets closure. On paper, the plan works. But every survival like that forces Dexter to go bigger next time. He frames a colleague. He manipulates federal investigations. He lets someone else take the fall. The central question stops being, can he hide a body, and becomes, how much reality will the world ignore for him? By season 4, the pattern escalates. Dexter toys with Trinity, prolongs the hunt, believes he can manage a serial killer and a family at the same time. The failure isn't just that Rita dies in a bathtub, it's that her death is a crime scene, a police notification, a funeral. The consequences spill past his kill table and into the institutional fabric around him. A widow, an orphan, a department grieving one of their own without ever knowing why. Then the show breaks its own frame. Deb walks into the church as Dexter kills Travis Marshall. No plastic sheeting can contain that. From that point on, the focus is not just on Dexter fixing problems, but on the world visibly fracturing around him. Deb's career disintegrates. LaGuerta's investigation turns the Bay Harbor Butcher from a closed case into an active accusation. And when Dexter chooses to kill LaGuerta in a shipping container, he doesn't just break the code. He commits an execution that echoes through a police station, a city, a press conference. Pattern interrupt. Remember how this started with refrigerated rooms and blood slides no one ever saw? By season 8, we're watching deaths in hospitals and on docks swarming with uniforms. Deb's shooting during the brain surgeon chaos, Vogel's murder, the storm that claims Dexter and Deborah. These are public tragedies, logged, reported, mourned. In New Blood, there is no Miami anonymity left. Logan dies in a small-town jail cell. Angela runs an investigation with modern forensics and open databases. Harrison, Audrey, the entire community of Iron Lake are pulled into the blast radius. Each major section will show that by this point, Dexter's loss of control isn't a secret pattern in his psychology. It's written into police records, obituaries, and a son who refuses to carry the story forward. So, if Dexter's loss of control is now stamped into public record and his son's memory, we have to ask the central question head on. Was he ever actually in control, or was that just the story he told himself while everything burned? Let's kick things off by going back to Dexter's own narration. I'm very good at my job. I control what I am. The code keeps me safe. From season 1 onward, he frames his life as a precision plan. Stalk, confirm, kill, clean. No loose ends. But when we line those proclamations up with the outcomes we've tracked, a different pattern emerges. Every time he insists he's managing the dark passenger, the universe answers with a reminder that he's not. Rita's death is the clearest fracture. Dexter plays a cat and mouse game with Trinity, convinced he can observe, learn, and then execute on his own timetable. He breaks Harry's rule about ending it quickly. He toys with the investigation. He indulges the fantasy that he can have a family and a long-term trophy kill at the same time. The result? Rita in a bathtub, Harrison in blood, and Dexter whispering that it's all because of me, while still clinging to the idea that the code will fix it next time. The same illusion drives LaGuerta's murder. By season 7, Dexter claims he's evolved beyond the code, that he can bend it when necessary and still stay in control. But in that shipping container, he doesn't kill a monster. He kills an innocent cop to protect his secret. Deb pulls the trigger, yet the plan, the psychology, the pressure that put her there are all his. This isn't the code keeping him safe. It's the code collapsing into pure self-preservation. Deborah's entire breakdown is basically a running commentary on Dexter's false control. She walks in on Travis Marshall's kill because Dexter miscalculates the timing. She spirals through guilt, therapy, substance abuse, and finally that ICU room where Dexter decides to end her suffering by unplugging her. He frames it as mercy. But step back and look. Every major choice she makes after that church is a reaction to him, not to any plan she ever had for her own life. And then, Harrison. In New Blood, Dexter congratulates himself for 10 years of restraint under Jim Lindsay. He tells himself the monster is leashed. Yet, Harrison's final act is to reject that narrative entirely. He sees the pattern: Rita, Deborah, Matt Caldwell, Logan, and concludes that Dexter's control is a lie that only produces more bodies. The bullet he fires isn't just patricide, it's a verdict on the whole mythology. To keep this clear, notice how often Dexter credits survival to his skill when it's really luck, other people's choices, or institutional incompetence. Leela blowing up the cabin saves him from Dokes. Quinn, dropping investigations because of Deb's feelings, keeps him out of prison. Miami Metro's tunnel vision lets the Bay Harbor butcher case die on the wrong man's corpse. Even in Iron Lake, Angela's investigation is effective, not because Dexter is careful, but because he isn't. So what if the control we hear in his voiceovers is not a description, but a coping mechanism? In this video, we're going to keep arguing that Dexter's sense of mastery is a self-soothing story, a way to make industrial-scale violence feel organized, ethical, almost noble. It lets him believe that as long as the code is followed, the consequences are justified. But from the moment Brian leaves that first blood-soaked message, Dexter's trajectory looks less like a mastermind architecting his life and more like a man being herded. Every attempt to assert control, choosing Deb over Brian, choosing Rita over solitude, choosing Harrison over escape, choosing Jim Lindsay over accountability, only tightens the trap. Along the way, the dark passenger stops being something he rides and becomes something that drags him, season after season, toward the exact collapse he insists he can avoid. The focus is not just on whether Dexter ever had control, but on why he needed to believe he did. Because once we understand that, the next question becomes even more unsettling. What happens to everyone who steps into the orbit of a man whose plans always fail, but who never stops narrating himself as the hero? If the original series is Dexter outrunning the avalanche, New Blood is the moment the mountain finally catches up. Iron Lake looks smaller, quieter, safer, but that's exactly the point. The same patterns are still running, just compressed into a town that can't absorb the blast radius. In Miami, Dexter's failures could diffuse into millions of people, overlapping cases, and institutional incompetence. In Iron Lake, every operational slip lands with a name and a face, one missing rifle, one suspicious blood trail in the snow, one police chief who actually follows through. The plan is the same: new identity, controlled urges, carefully chosen targets, but the environment is less forgiving, so every mistake echoes louder. To keep this clear, Iron Lake is a pressure cooker for all three layers we've been tracking. Operationally, Dexter's rust shows immediately. He kills Matt Caldwell, impulsively, sloppily, leaves a pattern of tire tracks and wildlife cameras, and a burned body that doesn't quite disappear. Relationally, he entangles himself with Angela, the town's moral center, while lying about his past and underestimating her as an investigator. Existentially, Harrison arrives as a walking indictment of the clean break Dexter thought he made in that storm, forcing the psychology he buried to surface in real time. Angela is the investigator Miami never had. Where LaGuardia circled Dexter through office politics and hunches, Angela uses actual investigation. She cross-references the Bay Harbor butcher with Dexter's fake identity, sends the screws from Kurt's trophy room to Miami, and runs the kind of basic interstate follow-up that exposes a decade of lies. She's not a genius profiler. She's just doing the job the universe has been begging someone to do. Harrison becomes the truth teller Deborah couldn't be. Deb loved Dexter too much, needed the fantasy of his control to stay intact, and when she finally saw the reality, it broke her. Harrison arrives already broken by that legacy. He names the darkness. He questions the code. He points out the hypocrisy of a man who punishes killers while leaving a trail of bodies and abandoned lives behind him. When Logan dies as collateral in Dexter's escape attempt, Harrison is the one who says what no one in Miami ever managed to say to Dexter's face: "This is not justice. This is you." Logan himself is the innocent victim that strips Dexter's myth bare. A decent cop, a coach, a man who genuinely cares about Harrison. Dexter kills him not to protect a child or stop a monster, but to preserve his own exit plan. One quick chokehold, one snapped neck, and the entire moral architecture of the code collapses in front of the person whose opinion finally matters. And this time, there is no narrative trapdoor, no hurricane to disappear into, no fake death, no new town waiting with a blank slate. Angela doesn't die. The investigation doesn't conveniently burn up in a fire. The finale methodically closes every escape route Dexter has ever used, until the only remaining solution is the one thing he can't narrate as control: his own death. Harrison's act is personal, but it's also symbolic. A son rejecting the legacy of control through violence that defined his father's life. He listens to Dexter justify Logan's murder as necessary, hears the same script that rationalized every body on every table, and decides that the only way to stop the pattern is to refuse the story entirely. He doesn't accept the code. He doesn't accept the plan. He accepts the consequences. In this video, we're going to treat New Blood not as an epilogue, but as the verdict. Every failed plan from Miami cashes out here, in one final, inescapable moment where Dexter's illusion of control finally meets a world that says no. But if the universe has delivered its judgment, there's still one piece left to examine. What does that judgment actually mean for the myth we've been sold about Dexter from the very first season? So, here's the invitation. On the next rewatch, don't follow the blood. Follow the moment the plan slips. Dexter's life looks different when we stop tracking kills and start tracking the first hairline fractures in his control. Let's kick things off with the Dokes, years in our heads. Season 2 is usually remembered for the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation. The drums of exposure getting louder every episode. But watch it again and pause on the tiny beats. The blood slides missing from his air conditioner. Dokes catching that flicker in Dexter's eyes at a crime scene. A trunk search that goes one question too far. The focus is not just on Dexter dodging suspicion, but on how often he's reacting rather than executing. The master planner spends most of that season cornered, improvising, and praying other people make bigger mistakes than he does. In this video, we're going to treat every iconic season the same way. With Miguel, don't just remember the dramatic rooftop confrontation. Look at the early lunches, the shared jokes, the first time Miguel pushes past the code and Dexter lets it slide because it feels good to be seen. That hesitation before a correction, that's the real point of failure. The trajectory of their partnership is written in that half second of ego. Rita's bathtub is the image everyone carries from season 4. But on rewatch, it stops being a shocking twist and becomes a logical endpoint. Track every scene where Dexter toys with Trinity instead of eliminating him. The stakeouts that turn into psychological experiments. The missed call from Rita he ignores because the hunt is more interesting. From a family vacation in the suburbs to blood in porcelain, the collapse is steady, incremental, and entirely traceable. To keep this clear, start looking for the smallest deviations. A forgotten blood slide at a crime scene. Deborah's eyes lingering one extra beat when Dexter lies. The way his voice catches before he reassures her, he's fine. Deb in the church with Travis Marshall isn't a random intrusion. It's the culmination of dozens of those micro hesitations, each one nudging her closer to the truth he can't quite keep buried. And when we reach New Blood, Harrison in the snow stops playing as a brutal surprise and instead feels like the only remaining outcome. Rewatch Angela's quiet investigation, the way she cross-references Miami cases with Iron Lake disappearances, the small-town scrutiny that Dexter underestimates because his old habits once worked in a broken system. His final failure isn't one bad decision. It's every earlier miscalculation finally cashing out. Seen through this lens, Dexter stops reading as a power fantasy and starts functioning as a cautionary tale about control, compartmentalization, and self-justifying codes. The central question on rewatch shifts from how will he get away with it to how many people will this one lie eventually pull under? And along the way, something unsettling happens. Our sympathy starts to drift, not toward the man with the plan, but toward the people orbiting his collapse, who never agreed to live inside his experiment. So if the myth changes when we rewatch, what does that say about the story we thought we were cheering for? So let's kick things off by turning the investigation back on us for a second. We've been tracking Dexter's collapse like a case file, but every viewer has that one scene where the illusion of control finally snapped. What was the exact moment you stopped believing his narration and started seeing the experiment for what it was? Was it Dokes in the cage in season 2, staring Dexter down through the bars, refusing to play the role of monster Dexter had written for him? That's the first time the plan is literally locked in place and still feels like a failure because Dexter is improvising around a man who will not bend. Or did it take Rita's death in the bathtub, the baby crying in the blood, for you to realize the code couldn't protect the people he claimed to love? Maybe it was La Guerta in the shipping container, standing on the exact ground where Dexter once felt untouchable. The central question there is brutal. When he kills her, do we still think he's operating under Harry's code? Or do we finally admit the code is just a story he tells himself to justify survival at any cost? Or did New Blood break you, with Harrison in the snow, forcing Dexter to confront that his last remaining plan is to escape the consequences yet again? To keep this clear, think about Dexter's trajectory in terms of a single line, before and after he kills innocents. Do you believe he could have kept the double life going if he had never crossed that line with La Guerta, with Logan? If the code had remained, at least technically, intact, would Miami Metro and later Angela's investigation still have closed in? Or was the collapse baked in from the very first bloodslide? We've walked through a lot of failures, but we want to know which loss hit you hardest. Rita, Deborah, Dexter himself, in Iron Lake. Which death permanently changed how you saw his psychology? Was Rita's murder the point where his family man fantasy died for you? Did Deborah's death in season 8 feel like the universe cashing in every time he pulled her deeper into his plans? Or was watching Harrison pull the trigger the only ending that made emotional sense after everything we'd seen? Along the way in this video, we've highlighted certain botched plans, Dokes, Trinity, Travis, Iron Lake, but we definitely didn't cover every single crack. Is there a smaller failure, you think, is underrated in showing he was never in control? A sloppier crime scene? A conversation with Harry? A moment with Hannah that quietly rewrites the code? Drop your scene in the comments. and be specific. Give us timestamps, episode titles, even the line of dialogue that made your stomach drop. The focus is not just on remembering the big twists, but on building a rewatch guide where anyone can go back, hit those exact beats, and watch Dexter's control dissolve in real time. Because when we go back and hit those beats, a pattern emerges that's hard to unsee. Dexter's life, from the humid streets of Miami to the frozen woods of Iron Lake, is not a saga of a mastermind in control. It's a chain reaction of plans collapsing under pressure, each perfect move triggering the next investigation, the next exposure, the next loss. From Brian's dismembered Barbie tableau to Angela printing out decades-old Bay Harbor Butcher articles, we watch the same arc repeat. Dexter builds a system. The system holds until it doesn't. And when it fails in 3 layers at once: operational, relational, existential. To keep this clear, think about how those layers escalate across the seasons, tightening around him like plastic wrap. Operational failure is the most obvious. The wrong blood slide in the wrong place. Dokes catching him at the cabin. LaGuerta following the Marina records. By New Blood, it's Angela using simple Google searches and modern forensics to connect Iron Lake to Miami. Every time Dexter thinks the logistics are airtight, reality finds the seam. The plan looks clean on the kill table. It falls apart the second another human being walks into the frame. Relational failure is where it really starts to hurt. Brian forcing him to choose between his brother and Deb. Rita dying because Dexter wanted the thrill of studying Trinity psychology instead of ending him. Deborah walking into that church as he kills Travis, then later pulling the trigger on LaGuerta to save him. Each major section of his life adds a new person he can't control and can't fully protect, until Harrison in Iron Lake becomes the final mirror, a son who sees the damage more clearly than the design. And then there's existential failure, the collapse of the story he tells himself. Every attempt to quit, to go normal, to rewrite the code, just spawns a new identity, a new lie, a new body on the floor. By the time Harrison is standing in that snowy clearing, Dexter isn't the meticulous avenger he imagined. He's the common denominator in every ruined life around him. That's the uneasy mix that keeps Dexter compelling. The rituals are meticulous. The plastic, the knives, the slides, the rules, but the consequences are chaos. Families destroyed, colleagues dead, cities haunted by killers he helped create or failed to stop. The focus is not just on his dark charisma, but on the wake it leaves behind. If you want to keep pulling at these threads, in this video, we're going to link you to a deep dive on Harry's code as the original design flaw, a breakdown of Trinity's psychology, and a season-by-season ranking of Dexter's most catastrophic decisions. Which plan do you think was the real point of no return? Because in the end, the central question isn't just how dangerous Dexter is, it's how dangerous our own myth of control can be. Dexter is just the bloodiest version of a story many of us live in smaller ways. We tell ourselves we're managing everything, right up until the moment the lie can't hold anymore.